and you want to see things continuing to play out as they are.
Fine. When Finlays sold part of their business to a Sri Lankan company, a lot was said. The senator for Kericho spoke and said many things. Now, if you're talking about the one business that Kericho and Bomet do, and do well, it's tea production. That is an industry that needs to be protected jealously. You can't afford to have such industrial issues rising, because what the damage it does is profound.
It is absolutely profound.
Yes. Anyway.
Another story that I think is of interest that maybe we just kind of glossed over yesterday is that, so you saw that mini reshuffle that took place among PSs by His Excellency the President.
Yes,
right?
Yes, we did.
Now, one of the dockets was moved from a lady who was the PS in the Department of Correctional Services, and this position was now given to one lady, Esther Ngero. Now, yesterday, she resigned, and she's citing personal reasons for her resignation. It was communicated in a press release sent to media houses by Chief of Staff and Head of Public Service Felix Koske. The statement stated that the outgoing PS was recently reassigned from the State Department of Performance Management and Delivery Services in the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary to the State Department for Correctional Services within the Ministry of Interior and National Administration. Ngero said, it has been said that in her time in office, how long have they been in office?
Who?
PSs.
Wait.
6 months? No,
less, I think.
No, it's less. It's much less, because January, February. It's less. It's about 2.5 months.
This is less.
Now, according to the statement by one Mr. Koske, Ms. Ngero has been instrumental in establishing institutional frameworks to support the implementation of the public service performance management and monitoring for ministries, state departments, and state agencies. So, whatever personal reasons those are personal, but she is out. We'll probably see the appointment of another in the coming days. All right. What else have you got, CT?
Well, we are looking at what's happening in Jubilee, and we're looking at what's happening in the country politically. You see, I did mention in passing when we were looking at the headlines that this is not new in this country. In the Star on page 5, they have chronicled this thing nicely. You see, let's start with how it is that political parties who have been in rulership in this country and how they've ended. KANU formed in 1960. It took over power from the colonialists in 1963. It ruled until 2002. It was removed from power by NAC.
Yes.
Okay? And NAC was formed in 2002, the top leaders, and they took power from KANU, isn't it? They won the presidency in December 2002. However, this thing collapsed in 2007 after top principals split. Okay? Then we move forward. In 2007, on September 16th, PNU was formed by Mwai Kibaki. Okay? NAC now aside, we have now PNU.
Yeah.
Okay? It controversially won the election on December 27th, 2007. Lost political grip after Kibaki was re-elected. Okay? So, put that aside. Then we get to 2012. We have a new party. It's called TNA. We've forgotten PNU, we've forgotten NAC, we've forgotten KANU. There in the backwaters. It formed an alliance with URP. They won the election in March 2013. Okay? Then, those parties were collapsed, and in 2016, and 12 other parties joined them, and then we had Jubilee.
Yes.
It won the election in 2017. Lost grip in a runoff to 2022 following wrangles. Now, UDA was formed in 2021 following the split in Jubilee. They won the election in August 2022. Why am I reading this? UDA will follow that trajectory. It's just a question of time.
What say you? You think it's going to split up as well?
Oh, yes, it will. This one, it will split up.
Why? Because you see it as having been put together, it was a party of convenience.
Yes.
To be able to have some kind of tool,
yes,
stepping stone towards power.
Yes.
And now when you have achieved your objective,
yes,
the tool that you use to get there is of no use to you anymore.
The early political parties, we're talking about KANU KADU, they're actually KPU. These people had ideologies. There was something they wanted to see done. But if you look at the narrative of this particular government, they have spent most of the time since they got into power blaming the government they took power from. and talking about the president specifically. And that seems to be the explanation for what is happening. It's Uhuru who did this, it's Uhuru who did that. Yes, we found that Uhuru had done this. And yet, they have a manifesto in which they detailed what they were going to do and how they were going to achieve it. How often do you hear, beyond the broad mention of things which are going to be done in large and in huge proportions, do you hear the brick by brick mention of the intentions that were carried on in their manifesto? No, you do not. So, it is a question of time. They will split. Believe me, relationships of convenience have only one ending, and that is splitting.
To split.
Because the purpose for which they came in will be fulfilled early, and then individual interests will take over, and after that, individual interests will clash, and when they clash, the end will be nigh. So just don't even hold your breath. It's going to happen.
It will happen.
Don't hold your breath.
It'll be interesting times to see if and when that actually does happen. And then, but as we've seen as the practices you've so nicely put out for us now, that just another one will come together and it will be used. It will be a special purpose vehicle for that particular event. Once that event has taken place and the outcome, the desired outcome, desired or not, has been reached, then your job here is done. Out onto the next.
Don't ever underestimate the power of example. Right? President William Ruto, when he was the deputy president, by the time we got to the second term, he did everything and anything to show that the president with whom he was elected, the first and the second time, was somebody who was set on opposing. So he more or less he and his party were in opposition within government, and yet they were in government.
Yeah.
And the reason was because they said there was a handshake. Now that example has been set. What we say is a precedent has been set. Now, what makes you think that something similar will not happen to him? It's just a question of time.
It's just a question of time.
Yes.
Okay. So, school principals' big dilemma as cost of food and essential supplies rise. We cannot run away from the importance of the education conversation, and all of this is marrying in time where capitation still has not been released from the government to the levels at which is acceptable or necessary for schools to run. What schools used to buy in terms of food supplies to keep for students, those have gone up in cost. And let's look at the details of it. The skyrocketing cost of food and other essential supplies is posing a challenge to boarding schools, with principals struggling to run the institutions amid a shortage of cereals in the country. With the little resources available, the situation has forced some principals to suspend commitments and focus only on food items and electricity. This is the season of it's called what? The drama festivals.
Yes, it is.
It is. This is the season.
Yes.
Now schools are saying, do we now start putting together the resources so that our children can travel around the country for this festival? Or do we buy food so that we can feed the children who are in our schools in order to learn? And they're having to make that decision because things are tight. School heads who spoke to the Standard said the recent increase in the cost of sugar and electricity, scarcity of maize and beans, coupled with the inability by parents to clear school fees arrears, is a big headache. Early this month, the Ministry of Education directed school heads to update student details in NEMIS, a move that has been seen as a delaying tactic in the remittance of capitation. Remember, we looked at that and they said, you know what? The problem is not that we don't have money, but what we're asking you to do is to check the system and make sure that every child who's been documented as having been part of your school is actually in the national system. And we said, well, there's a reason why that's being done. There's also a reason why it's being done. Okay? The Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers, CUPET, has warned that some schools could be grounded if the government does not release funding soon. Learning institutions are currently sustained by the mercies of suppliers of goods and services. Their patience is running out due to accrued accumulated bills, according to Mr. Paul Rotich, who is the Nandi County CUPET Secretary. Rotich said some schools owed suppliers and subordinate staff millions of shillings. Remember, this is not just from this term alone. Last term, they owed them because they were not able to pay. By the time money came in, 1, 2, 3 things had already lapsed. So we're looking at actually an interesting situation here in terms of what can happen. That for the first time in a very long time, extracurricular, remember COVID, because of COVID, in schools, extracurricular activities were shelved completely because of the movement and association that comes about by nature of the fact that children travel. The school festivals, it is this term that the drama festivals, is this term that we saw it coming back. For the first time, COVID aside, is when you will see that schools have to make a decision about whether they will go for these events or whether they will feed children in school. And here we are talking about...
Well, they have to decide, don't they?
Which party is breaking up or what.
You see, you've gotten the heart of the matter. And this particular brush has to tar the opposition as well, because they mention the cost of living every once in a while. Once in a while, they will talk about, the counties haven't received money. But the mention isn't spirited. It isn't adequately spirited. It bespeaks of a matter that is mentioned because it exists, but not because it is given priority, or it is seen to be something that has gravitas. We really do have a problem in the country, and it's a genuine problem. And people are genuinely suffering. Poverty levels are increasing.
They are.
People are going to fall sick and they will not know what to do with themselves simply because the systems that are supposed to ensure that they're looked after
don't work.
If you have hospitals refusing to take NHIF because NHIF hasn't paid them what is owed to them, it's cyclical. There's a vicious cycle that has begun and it's downward spiraling. And this government does not seem able to stop the downward spiral. They talk about these things, but one doesn't see adequate evidence as to the intent of bringing this thing to a halt.
It is. It doesn't look like a very pretty picture that's being painted right about now. Who knows in which direction the brush strokes will go? It's coming around to 7 o'clock. Let's listen to the news and come back and enter into our conversations on the Situation Room this morning. Ndruoko and CT Muga with you, delving into those conversations that are hard-hitting. TISA and Transparency International will be in the hot seats after 7. Our live streams are up on Facebook and YouTube. Good morning. It's 7 o'clock.
Spice up your life. Good morning, this is Zizwa Dennis Aseto. The Azimio coalition has suspended their participation in the bipartisan talks for 7 days, citing various issues, among them the Jubilee Party is left alone. In a statement, Nairobi Senator Edwin Sifuna said Azimio was unable to persuade the Kenya Kwanza team over various issues that formed the basis of the discussion. This after the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties approved the changes by the faction led by Kanini Kega that axed Vice Chair David Murathe, Secretary General Jeremiah Kioni, and National Treasurer Kagwe Gishohi from the party. The registrar says that retired President Uhuru Kenyatta has not been affected and that the decision was arrived at without the knowledge of the existence of the court order.
We were not aware that there were orders, but the decision about the removal of the members was made on Friday. So to us, we have not acted against the law because we made the decision before the orders.
Retired President Uhuru Kenyatta's wing got a reprieve after the political party's dispute tribunal banned nominated MP Sabina Chege's wing from taking over the party's leadership. The tribunal ruled in favor of Kioni, who had asked the bench to issue temporary staying orders until the case is heard and determined. And former President Uhuru Kenyatta met a European Union delegation for talks on the ongoing quest for peace and stability in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The EU delegation was led by Bernard Quentin, who is the Deputy Managing Director for Africa. Kenyatta, who is the facilitator of the East African Community-led Nairobi peace process, also met with U.S. Ambassador to Kenya Meg Whitman as well as her Switzerland counterpart Valentine Zwoljiger for deliberations. The representatives and the delegation deliberated on the current operational situation, progress made, and their support for the ongoing political process of finding lasting peace and stability in Eastern DRC. And President William Ruto has nominated Mary Wanyonyi, the spouse of former chairperson of the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission of Fuller Chebukati, for appointment as the chairperson of the Commission on Revenue Allocation. The Public Service Commission shortlisted 3 individuals, and President William Ruto selected Wanyonyi from the list. If approved by Parliament, Wanyonyi will subsequently fill the vacancy caused by the retirement of Jane Kiringai, who had served a full 6-year term at the helm of CRA. Prior to the nomination, she was the Senior Deputy Accountant General and Head of Accounting Unit at the Lands Ministry, where she has served since January 2019. And one person has lost their life to cholera in Homa Bay, with 73 others currently infected. Public health officials have asked residents to prioritize personal hygiene, ensure the consumption of safe water, and practice proper sanitation to prevent further spread of the disease.
We are still grappling with the unfortunate disease of cholera in our county, and particularly in our sub-county of Suba South, focusing on the Sindo area. And we have not managed yet to contain the disease, but we are realizing results which are a product of our sustained efforts to try to contain the disease.
A similar pattern has been witnessed in Kirinyaga County, and miraa traders and farmers in Meru have come out to strongly criticize the National Authority for the campaign against alcohol and drug abuse for a report that lists miraa as a drug.
Leo ni siku ya mkutano wa kamati wetu wote wa union. Tulikuwa tunaangazia mambo ya nakada. Tulisikia chairman wa nakada akisema ya kwamba miraa ni drugs. Tunataka kumwambia leo miraa si drugs, miraa ni catch crop kama mayani chai, kama kahawa, kama pyrethrum. Leo ni siku nyingine pia ya kumwambia chairman, sisi tuko na yeye. Kama hatatoa miraa kwa orodha ya drugs. Tumeona amebadilisha na ile namba ambayo alikuwa ameandika pale. Miraa ikatoka mpaka akaweka miraa namba 3 ikawa bangi ndio namba 4. Na hatujawahi ona. Tunataka kukuambia bwana Victor, hatujawahi ona mtu amekula miraa akilala kwa barabara. Ni kweli watu wetu?
The Special Operations Group, the Administration Police Elite Unit, successfully recovered a cache of weapons after engaging in a fierce gun battle with suspected members of the Al-Qaeda-linked terrorist outfit Al-Shabaab in Garissa County. The National Police Service said that the SOG officers who were conducting a routine foot patrol stumbled upon a makeshift camp believed to be housing suspected Al-Shabaab militants, triggering a shootout. The militants fled the scene, abandoning a significant stockpile of weapons. Among the weapons recovered were 2 rocket-propelled grenades with 7 warheads, along with 6 AK-47 rifles accompanied by 20 magazines. The security agents also seized a PKM machine gun with a belt of 200 rounds, 2 hand grenades, materials for improvised explosive devices. I'm Dennis Aseto. Good morning.
Spice FM, Nakuru.
Okay, folks, what's popping on these streets this Wednesday morning? Where are you? We're looking at this traffic building up on the Thika Superhighway today. It looks like it will not be too crazy. Service lanes, they're your friends. Hold their hand. Let them take you to the CBD this morning. We're looking at some traffic coming out of Westlands. Waiaki Way looks like it's going to be pretty busy for most parts of the morning. It's coming off James Gishuru hot and heavy. Just past that drift, it's going to be happening for some time. About an hour or so, probably what traffic will hang around for. On Limuru, is heavy as well. It's coming off Kiambu Road, heavy as well. And we're looking at the Thika Superhighway all the way from Outer Ring Junction. Remember, service lanes use them. The Southern Bypass is also looking pretty good. And you're also looking at the Red Hill Link Road as an option to get you away from the crazy traffic that's happening on Waiyaki Way this morning. All right, let's take a look at Jogo Road. Always slow movement there right around this time. All the way from the Makadara train station, taking you out towards the City Stadium roundabout. Lusaka Road is going to go to your left with some traffic, and then you're also going to go back on your right to Landis with some traffic heading out towards Kamkunji and then onto Haile Selassie. Gong Road starting to pile up. We're looking at Naivasha Road heading into Gitanga, Riara, and then through towards that James Gichuru that we had seen before. Traffic hour starts early today. Whatever it is that you're doing, hang tight. Let's know what's going on where you are. Talk to us on Spice FM KE on Twitter.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
8 minutes after 7 o'clock, Karibu Sana to Kenya's biggest conversation. Welcome to our audience on KTN Home. Our live streams are up on Facebook and Twitter. Spice FM, I beg your pardon, Facebook and YouTube. Spice FM KE is the handle. It's Wednesday, the 24th of May, 2023, into the second hour of the Situation Room. Ndroko and CT Muga with you this morning, and we're telling you to have a cuppa this morning. It's Assis Tea from the Rolling Tea Estates of Kiptagich in Kurusoy South District, saying your premium blends, taking you through a wonderful tea experience with the very many different varieties that are available, from purple tea to hibiscus tea to green tea to black tea to lemon tea to ginger tea to masala tea. Name it, you will find it. And it's premium blends that are available around the world and in Kenya, all grown here, manufactured here. It's great stuff to have, and tea as is, tea for you this morning. KTN Home, welcome our audiences here. Also reminding us that next month, KTN Home rebrands all your wonderful entertainment and the programs you love for kids, soaps, sports, your Club Kiboko, and all the shows that you've always enjoyed comes fully reloaded in June. KTN Home, just the way you like it. We're going to have an interesting conversation in this hour, and our guests are already in the studio. And even as we get into that, and before we welcome them, let's hear today's proverb from the Djiboutians.
Yes, proverbs the whole of this week come from the country of Djibouti. Mainland Africa, it is the smallest country. Mainland, meaning within this huge geographical mass called the African continent. But then Seychelles is smaller, population of 950,000. But of interest, it got its independence in 1977 from the French. Yes. Now that same year it joined the UN. It's odd and interesting when you look at Wikipedia and how it is described. Together with Eritrea, they're described as dictatorships.
Of course, strong man, such things, yeah.
Yes, small, yeah. Well, the moment you label a country and the leadership therein as being dictatorial, it's what you imply that now takes force it's like nothing good happens in that country, and yet a lot of good happens in Djibouti. Remember, that's the headquarters of IGAD. Is right there in Djibouti.
Yes, it is.
Okay, it's a serious trade route. Red Sea, right up to the Indian Ocean. A huge refueling port for very, very many seafaring vessels. So it's not insignificant.
And has some of the best red tuna on the planet.
Yes. Now, for those who do not know, red tuna is a fish.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. It's not a tree. Okay. Okay. A wound inflicted by a friend does not heal. That is the proverb of the day.
A wound inflicted by a friend does not heal. Diana Gishengo is the National Coordinator of the Institute for Social Accountability, TISA, and Sheila Masinde is the Executive Director of Transparency International, Kenya. Both of them fill the hot seats this morning. Karibuni sana, ladies.
Thank you very much, Lou.
That
City.
Karibu. That proverb from Djibouti, what are your thoughts about that? Diana, we start with you.
That's so true. And at every level, at personal level, when a friend decides to stab you, that's very, very painful. It's the highest level of betrayal because they ought to have your back and so on. At the national level or in the world that we work in of governance, somebody who understands what they are doing and they stab you, betray you, it is extremely painful and nearly unforgivable. The wound inflicted by a friend
Does not heal.
does not heal. It never heals, because how do you ever regain the trust? This is somebody you had surrendered all your trust to before. But maybe, I think sometimes you heal. Sometimes you heal and realize they were never your friend. I think so. I think we have to get to that point where you realize, if it had to, they gave me these scars, these burns, and so on, maybe they were never my friends.
Another level. What about you, Sheila?
I would actually interpret it in the perspective of leadership and integrity, my pet subject. Because for me, a friend is someone you entrust. So I would look at it in the context of we entrust people with leadership positions because you believe in them, you have confidence in them, and then they abuse, say, their offices, and that in essence abuses, the trust that you have given them. So for me, I think as Kenyans, we have wounds that are inflicted every single day and are getting very hard to heal. So we're walking around with a lot of wounds as Kenyans.
Wow.
Walking wounded.
Walking
Wounded. Sounds like a nice book title.
Think about it, talk to your editor already. This morning, both of you are here, and thank you for being here. There's a conversation you'd like us to have. And so let's give some background to it. We saw in the last couple of weeks that the president nominated outgoing now, at this point, Director of Public Prosecutions, Nuruddin Haji, in the light of the resignation of General Kameru, or rather the retirement of General Kameru, who was the director of the National Intelligence Service. And we now see that the name that came up for nomination, a former spy man, a former NIS man, Nuruddin Haji, then being nominated to be the director of the National Intelligence Service. All right? No big deal. Nominate. He needed somebody. There was going to be a space there. PP then now takes over that position. So what's the problem? I guess that's where we are. There's a problem, obviously. Okay?
Yes.
And both of your organizations, TISA, the Institute for Social Accountability, as well as Transparency International, have come together and you're saying, you know what? There's a problem with this appointment. And it is going as far as saying that it is unconstitutional, almost calling it an affront to the Constitution. Why is that? Start with you, Diana.
This is one of those appointments that feel like a contradiction. Okay? Because if you recall, is it just last month the president did an interview with members of the fourth estate, and he was asked, the DPP Nudin Haji acknowledged that he was under undue influence. What do you think? And the president says, I think you need to ask him. Okay? There's a problem there, but talk to Nudin. He should be able to answer all these questions. Then within a very short period, already by the time that conversation gets to be part of the things that are being clarified in a presidential address, they are of national interest, okay? And without giving the country any answers and deciding that Nudin should be the one to give all these answers, he goes ahead and nominates him to be the chief spy. Now, we would have celebrated a new trend, because chief spies always come from the president's ethnic bedroom. That has been the trend over the years. Okay, if you look at it, all the chief spies come from the president's bedroom. So this would have been progress and a move at creating nationalism in a very, very critical office and showing that we can trust any Kenyan. But the DPP has held the office of Director of Public Prosecution. He was vetted. People gave their views. There have been different views by people in the legal profession and prosecutors. But in particular, last year, after Kenya Kwanza took office, in a public interview, he acknowledged, look, remember the many cases I called all of you members of the fourth estate and wrote on very beautiful blue paper. Went to court, okay, and told you we are fixing this country, issues of corruption and so on, murder, some of them really, somebody had a gun on my head and now I have to, I'm back. I now have my head back. The gun has been removed. I have to withdraw them.
Diana,
he acknowledges.
He acknowledges. Beautiful. Sure, he said. I mean, just at that point, he said. And interestingly, however you want to decipher this, for every case that he has withdrawn, he said, and not one was it different. Lack of evidence then became the reason why it was being withdrawn. That we have found out later on in the game that there has been lack of evidence, and so it was inconclusive. We cannot carry out with this. Please go on.
That's within his mandate, and very many cases are withdrawn. Okay, but he says he commends the prosecution, fully aware, not whether there was evidence or not. He was unduly influenced, and still, as the DPP took the decision to charge malicious, I would put quote unquote maliciously, because then if you know this does not meet the threshold, there's a problem. When he does that and acknowledges, it could be two things. This is a very honest, he's finally decided to be honest and he's telling us the truth and doing the right thing by withdrawing. But he has not shown us anything that moving forward we should trust. If there is a knife, okay, behind his back, that he will not do the same thing. There are no safeguards for that. And the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions Act, in Section 4, it clearly states that in prosecuting matters, there must be equity, there must be objectivity, impartiality, it must follow the natural course of justice, there must be public confidence consistently. Now, all the cases that have so far been withdrawn have been linked to people who have now ascended into power under the Kenya Kwanza government. is at the strongest confidence for Kenyans who are non-aligned, who may be Azimio. And in the midst of all that cloud of doubt, okay, not guilt, doubt, you now decide this is the most suitable person to become our chief spy. An office with higher levels of responsibility, requires higher integrity, but with less public interaction. I just leave it to Kenyans. What are we supposed to think of this particular appointment?
What are we supposed to think, Sheila? I mean, the picture that Dorcas has, that Diana has painted here is that, you know what, you have somebody who seems almost undecided in what he was doing at the office of the DPP. Now you're saying, let's take that indecision and let's elevate it and say you will sit in this office as a director of the National Intelligence Service, where there is less public interaction, gives you an opportunity to make decisions on your own.
For us, we've been quite clear. If you've read our petition as the National Integrity Alliance, which consists of Transparency International Kenya, TISA, the Kenya Human Rights Commission, and Inuka Kenya, we are a citizen-centered integrity and anti-corruption coalition that's really fighting for the promotion of, rather promoting integrity in this country. And if you look at our petition, we've laid out the grounds under which we are dissatisfied rather with Mr. Nurdin's Haji performance at the Office of Director of Public Prosecutions, and we have deeply analyzed. And the reason why this petition is actually coming at this time is because we spent quite a bit of time, the last 8 months, looking at those cases as were being dropped day by day. There are more actually than we've just listed. Actually, we've just listed 7 cases, but there are many more cases because we were looking at the ones where we had information and the ones which were based on corruption and economic crimes, because there are others like murders, as Diana has referenced. And the reason why it took a bit of time is because we also took time to file access to information request to his office, and he wrote back and said, if we want that information on those cases that he has withdrawn, we are free to go to court. So it's been quite a process getting some of those court files, which we are still analyzing. But if you look at the 7 cases that we have listed, it actually leads you to a decision that this is a person who is incompetent. He has not complied to the laws that he should in taking charge and exercising the powers of his office, particularly the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions Act, the Decisions to Charge Guidelines, the Public Officers Ethics Act, the Leadership and Integrity Act as well. And I'll just maybe highlight some of the cases that have led us to this conclusion that and which lay grounds for that is unfit to hold public office and for removal from that particular office, and even unsuitability to take charge of the Director General's Office of the National Intelligence Service. One particular case, if you look at the details, one of Geoffrey Mwangi and the NHIF case particularly. Geoffrey Mwangi applied to the court in July 2022, saying that case should be dropped, that there was insufficient evidence. The Director of Public Prosecutions vehemently held at that time, in July 2022, that he had sufficient evidence to continue with that case.
Yes.
In January 2023, he applies to withdraw that case on the basis that there's insufficient evidence. Mind you, this case has been ongoing for a number of years. You already oppose the accused's application. But then 6 months later, you now agree with him, And then the other matter is, I think there was a Ben Chumo, the Kenya Power case.
Yes.
Which was, I think he was charged in court in 2018. So this case has been there for almost 4 or 5 years, right? 34 witnesses have taken the stand. 34 witnesses. And from these 34 witnesses, you're saying that there's insufficient evidence. 4 years later, there's insufficient evidence to charge, to continue with that case. Most of these people would say are politically exposed, politically connected people. Is that a coincidence? In some of these cases, it is just one person for whom the charges have been withdrawn.
Yes.
Yeah. So others are still being charged as part of the case, but one person maybe has been exonerated. Yeah. And then the other matter that is also quite suspect is that in all these cases, there has been, at least as far as we are concerned, there has been no effort to return these files to the investigating agencies to say, look, there is insufficient evidence here. Based on this, could you reinvestigate or reopen this file? You know, when we've tabulated the amounts concerned in all these cases, it's amounting to almost 11.3 billion. And these are just the cases that we have set apart. It could be much more. Now, you have been working in an office, you have been charged with prosecution, and in almost 5 years, you're telling us that some of the cases that you have handled amounted to nothing. You know, that if that doesn't demonstrate incompetence and gross misconduct, what does? This guy actually, money spent in terms of
man hours.
Yes, money spent, man hours,
yeah.
not just of the prosecution, but investigators. And we know how long investigations, corruption investigations particularly, take in this country. Some of those cases have been investigated for more than 5 years. Yeah. Then they have been prosecuted, they've been in court for almost 5 years for the adjudication process. So you've wasted investigation, the time of investigators, prosecutors, and our judges. Yeah. And what does that mean in terms of access to justice to Kenyans, people who are filing other cases? You know, you clog up our court system with cases which you later withdraw, and that inhibits other Kenyans from accessing justice because, you know, there's a backlog of cases. We need to look at it in the bigger picture and the impact that Haji's actions have had on Kenyans, on our justice system, and on our economy. Imagine 11.3 billion, at a time when we are facing such extreme financial difficulty. And worse is that the president then goes ahead to nominate this person, who I would actually say is responsible now for the loss of all this money. And we've not tabulated all that human and monetary resources that have been spent.
Yes.
Even the time that we are spending here talking about is money lost. Even money for Spice FM. That's your time and money lost talking about this because someone has been unable to exercise their mandate. So we thought that President Ruto, at a time when this country is virtually on its knees, you know, due to the economic crisis, you would consider such things. Is this someone who can be held responsible, you know, for financial resources? You've already overseen further loss because you've not been able to ensure that you win convictions and even institute, you know, recovery, other entities then institute recovery efforts towards all these resources that have been lost. But you now want to put him in charge of the National Intelligence Security Services. If this person could not exercise such independence, you know, and objectivity and impartiality in the exercise of his mandate as DPP, how sure are we that we can entrust him with a position of such significance and sensitivity as the Director General of the National Intelligence Service?
You know,
that's my question.
Do you understand what you're actually asking? Let me explain to you what I mean. If I'm to take your argument to its logical conclusion, and you're asking the question, can we trust this person with this new job that is at the heart? Because you're talking about intelligence, you're talking about security. You're asking the question then, the appointing authority, can we also trust this person with running this country if these are the decisions that he is making an appointment? Is that what you're asking?
I am basically asking that. And it's not a question we've just asked on Haji's appointment, but then at a time when this country is facing such economic hardship, we have seen these same people that have been exonerated in these corruption cases ending up to take charge of critical executive offices in the country. So in entirety, we are asking, where is merit, you know, in public appointments? Where is a place of merit? Is it just all about tokenism? and political reward, But I think back to the matter on the DPP, our arguments are actually based on constitutional and the legal foundation as laid bare by those laws and sections of the Constitution that we have raised in terms of in terms of the provisions that he has flouted and why he's unsuitable to continue holding that office or moving on to another office.
I hear what you're saying, but there's something I don't quite understand. The fact that you talk about evidence and you talk about you providing evidence and basing your argument and the position you take on evidence, is it possible, even in the absolute slightest, that it probably was true? Because the DPP doesn't have investigative powers. Investigative powers are in the hands of somebody else. Is it possible that they could have pursued this case? Because the length of time a case takes in court often has to do with just those of you who are legally minded understand how these processes can deliberately be delayed because this happens and somebody postpones and this happens, and somebody who has the means to and understands it can go on for years, and we've seen them going on for years. Is it possible?
CT's asking, is it actually possible that there was no evidence?
Yes.
This happened at a time.
Yes.
And this happened at a time whereby the same DPP had gone to court, and members of the bench would ask the DPP, please do not come to court until you have satisfactory evidence that allows us then to now follow in this court process. He did sit here and say the same thing to us.
Exactly.
That do not come here and waste the court's time if you do not have satisfactory evidence that will carry a case forward in the same period.
Yes.
So the question here is it possible that he would then have brought cases before court for which he did not have, that did not bear the evidentiary threshold that was required for a case to go forward? Diana is wagging her finger.
There is that, but there is also at the time, whatever it is he had was adequate as far as he could see. And later on, you realize that it was inadequate. Is it possible?
Is it possible, Diana, before we go to the break, is it possible?
For that nuance to actually exist?
But you see, we have the decision to charge guidelines, which actually articulate, what the thresholds in terms of what you need, what a case needs to meet before you take a case to court. You should ensure that the evidence is admissible and it is evidence that can secure a conviction against the person that you're taking to court.
Correct.
So we trust that, because he is a professional, he's someone who is experienced.
And he was a lawyer.
That by the time you're taking a matter to court, you've analyzed the evidence that you have and you've weighed that, against the interest of justice and the public interest.
But I'm asking the question, is it possible that at a later date you can have evidence that is contrary to it, and that forces you to look at this thing and say, no, I made a mistake here. This now nullifies these. What I'm seeing here nullifies what was brought before me. Is it possible?
Professionally, it is possible to make it would be professional misconduct to analyze evidence, then take a decision. Let's remember the powers of the DPP. The DPP has the power to institute all proceedings, all. After they've been investigated, there are very, very many files that came from the DCI which he did not charge. Because ultimately, and if you remember the tug of war that was there between Kinoti and DPP, it was around that. And he was supported that the office of the DPP is the one with the capacity and the clarity to determine the evidence provided. Is it enough to carry this particular charge all the way to prosecution and to a possible conviction? Okay? He was very, very well resourced. In the last 7 years, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution has seen significant improvement in human resource. Where there is any doubt in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, he has the power to order any investigative agency, EACC, DCI, even if it goes to KRA, any investigative agency to give him more information. Once he has satisfied himself, this is okay, then he proceeds to to court. In a number of these cases, it is where you have had even 30 witnesses give their evidence in court. Okay? Then after such a long hearing, then you have an awakening. There's no evidence.
Inadequate evidence.
And it questions not just his own capability, but all those very qualified prosecutors that we have at the ODPP.
Precisely.
Okay? So it's a very deep question. And let's come back to the bigger ramification of what Sheila has just said around the withdrawal and then the appointment. What are we losing?
Let's do that. Let's take a break right now and come back and say, okay, so what is the bigger picture? We're looking at this as it might be an inconsequential action, but what you're saying is that it bears heavily then moving forward. It bears heavily on the rest of the situation around all this. It's at this point we want to remind you that the Kuza Awards are taking place and they're here with us. We're banking on you to vote for us. All you have to do is SMS Kuza for free to 15601 and vote for Spice FM as your favorite station. Remember, voting closes on the 28th of May 2023. That's vote SMS Kuza to 15601. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. It's 23-8. Conversation continues after this.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Close your eyes. Imagine your unsecured personal loan application has been approved. Imagine all the things you can do and buy. Imagine all the life goals you can achieve. Now stop imagining. Talk to your employer to switch to I&M at Work and get access to Kenya's largest unsecured personal loan of up to 10 million shillings. Call 0719 088 000 today. I&M. Tunakujali.
This year's Kuza Awards are here, and we are banking on you to vote for us. All you have to do is SMS Kuza for free to 15601 and vote for Spice FM as your favorite station. Remember, voting closes on the 28th of May 2023.
Online, mobile, and on radio. www.spiceradio.co.ke.
All right, looking at cloudy conditions in Nairobi at 15, highs of 23 and lows of 14. It's 14 and sunny in Nakuru, highs of 24, and we'll see highs of 23 in a mostly sunny Nyeri at 15. At 15, it's sunny in Eldoret, highs of 24, and partly sunny at 25. In Mombasa, going to highs of 30. We'll see highs of 30 as well in a mostly sunny Malindi this morning. And at 20, it's sunny in Kisumu, highs of 29, 16 and sunny in Kakamega with highs of 28. At 19, Kampala is cloudy, highs of 28, and we'll see highs of 31 in a sunny Dar es Salaam at 25. At 9 degrees, it is mostly clear in Johannesburg, highs of 23, and Lagos is cloudy at 26, going to highs of 31, coming down to lows of 26. It's clear at 24 in Kinshasa. It'll go to highs of 32 and lows of 24.
Spice up your life.
All right, so traffic still continues this morning, and we're looking at heavy coming off the Thika Superhighway. That still continues coming into the CBD. Looks like it'll be that way for some time. Getting into the city, also coming out of Westlands, pretty busy as well. On Mombasa Road, that doesn't cause too much of an issue through most of the morning. We'll see some traffic coming off of James Gishuru as well, coming in through Westlands. Gong Road has become pretty busy as you get all the way to the roundabout. That's coming in from Rilo Dingaway, that's coming off Langata Road. So the city seems to be a beehive of activity coming in from all directions. Looking for escape routes? Let me give you some. The southern bypass looks pretty good. Get out into the city, the longer routes, but you won't have to contend with any traffic. North Airport Road continues to be busy as you're going towards Outer Ring, and it'll take you towards the eastern bypass, which has all this traffic as you're heading out towards the AP College Junction. Okay, so we're in traffic hour proper now. Let's see what happens in a short while. Where are you? Are you stuck anywhere? Talk to us. Spice FM KE on Twitter.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
19 minutes to 8 o'clock in the Situation Room this morning. On the hot seats, we have Sheila Masinde, as well as the Institute for Social Accountability, and Diana Kisho is with us this morning. Okay, so we're having a conversation about the cases that were withdrawn by the DPP. We're looking at a situation now whereby the president has now nominated the DPP to be the Director General of the National Intelligence Service. Sheila, you talked about ramifications, and Diana giving way to that as we went to the break. Ramifications of this, we may see it like no big deal, right? Okay, evidentiary threshold was not met. Cases were withdrawn. What does it look like if we're looking at the bigger picture of the nation here? That the same individual now has been given an opportunity to manage affairs at a place where really nobody asks any questions. What does this mean? On that level, and also on this other level where we're saying, okay, then is it possible? And sorry, I just thought of, what if I have a case in court? I could very easily come to you and say, well, the evidence that you have against me, how do we know that it has met the threshold if we have all these other cases being pulled? What does that mean now for both?
I would just go back to emphasize the point on personal responsibility. And if you look at the various laws that we expect public officers to abide by, with the Public Officers Ethics Act and even the respective laws that set up the various public institutions, there's an underlining on personal responsibility. We expect that state officers will take personal responsibility for failures and successes in their office. But in this regard, it's concerning that for an independent office, this particular individual has failed to take personal responsibility, and we have gone ahead to indicate for these cases that we have listed the amount of losses.
Has he failed to take personal responsibility? I'd like to understand
personal responsibility, because you were given the responsibility, you have the mandate, to oversee public prosecutions in this country. You have spent more than 5 years. You have spent more than 5 years. All we're asking is that you oversee public prosecutions, and you have a team, a big team, with public resources to be able to undertake that role. You have taken cases to court. They have been in the court pipeline for more than 5 years. After 5 years, you decide that all this work that you have done amounts to nothing because there's no sufficient evidence. You withdraw those cases. We don't see any effort towards taking back those files to the investigative authorities. Rather, as we speak now, we are not sure what is the fate of all those cases that were withdrawn. Ideally, they should have been taken back for investigation, because the fact is that there was a crime that was still committed. So who did it? Shouldn't we then go back to the investigative authorities, because he has the power to direct investigations? That hasn't happened. And that is why, in response even to your earlier question on can someone decide to withdraw a case even at midpoint, because you realize
could there be circumstances?
There could be circumstances, yes. But if you fail even to communicate, we have asked that question, and that is why we wrote and asked, please give us the reasons, the grounds under which these cases were removed. He said, go to court if you want that information, if you want those court files. Why can't you, as a public office, just simply explain to the public, these are the specific grounds for removal? You just put a blanket response, insufficient evidence. How do you expect the public to trust that if you're not willing to further explain what do you mean by insufficient evidence, and what measures have you taken to fill up those gaps in evidence by basically then returning those cases? And we've seen before, and you know why, CT, I'm also emphasizing this particular point, is that in many of these cases, and even previously as some of these cases were being investigated, there was a lot of back and forth between the ODPP and the DCI. Various investigative agencies, DCI, whether it is DCI and even EACC.
Yes.
KEMSA case, the COVID-19 KEMSA case, is it now 3 years on, has never seen the light of day. Why? We've been writing to ask. We even did a petition to the ODPP and asked, where is this case last year? And the feedback we're given is that the case is not strong yet for investigation, and they took back the file, so EACC is still investigating that matter 3 years on. And we said, okay, well and good, let's give you time to investigate if what you're looking for is evidence.
Yep.
In many of these cases, and you remember what the DPP would say, time without number, that I am not going to take a case to court without evidence. You know, every time he was accused of delaying cases or being the weak link in anti-corruption and in anti-corruption enforcement, because he said, I will not take a weak case to court, I will take my time to investigate. Isn't it curious that then in these cases he did not take his time to investigate, and you're now remembering 5 years on?
Sheila, you have a very valid point, but you see, I'm looking at it this way. I am thinking, even as you're speaking, of the myriad cases that were handled by the DPP. If we were to talk about averages, these are high-profile cases which involve a lot of money. If we look at just the cases that were prosecuted, if we look at percentages, how many cases, just in terms of cases, not the level of or the intensity or the profile of the case, but just the cases, how many of these actually went to court and were acted upon? If we were to talk about averages and percentages, on average, did the office of the public prosecutor actually do their job? Were cases prosecuted? Apart from these ones, were they well prosecuted of the many cases that went through that office?
As we have said, there are many other cases that they handle.
Very many, actually.
There are very many cases. And it's not just corruption. We know that they do many other cases, murder and other crimes that they handle. Yeah. And I think it's for you to call him and to give you the data that in terms of the success rate of his cases. Maybe he'll probably give those numbers at the point of his vetting. But why we are emphasizing on this is the impact that it has in terms of enforcing impunity in this country. Because what we're saying is that you can be accused of a crime, but those cases can be easily withdrawn. Because the impression that we get from this, because we've clearly mapped out these cases and where some of these individuals now sit, in Kenya, they are sitting in high executive offices. It is not misguided for us to have then that perception that these were politically connected people, and the time at which these cases were withdrawn is quite curious. Many of these cases were withdrawn just before they were vetted, or just before they were appointed, and even for some, just after they were appointed. So that is why it's so curious. You have to draw those and make those linkages.
I agree with you completely, but I'm simply saying again that in addition to what you're saying, you cannot lump the office of the DPP and the DPP himself and say he's incompetent when these are not the only cases that his office handled. They were high profile. Yes. And indeed, everything you say about those cases are true. There are many individuals who had those cases, they were dropped, they were given some really serious appointments. Okay? It is true. But what about the other cases that they prosecuted successfely?
But City,
are we to judge this particular office just...
City, first is, and I have sat with people from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, including deputy directors. And in certain meetings where they were being held to account by even Parliament, they have said this is a case of personal responsibility.
Okay.
And in particular because...
Meaning what? When you say personal responsibility?
Because it is the DPP himself who acknowledged that I did this out of other influence. And Section 6 of the ODPP Act requires independence and is very, very express that all matters and actions taken by DPP shall not have consent of anyone, no authority other than the law. Other than the law. So if you're the leader at that level, you're tainting not only the office, but you must take personal responsibility. And why we are sticking to the leadership and integrity chapter is because you're first appointed on account of your personal integrity.
Diana, I
That
just want to
becomes
clarify.
tainted
Yeah.
in that regard.
I want to
and what we
clarify.
want to rescue is all these other officials and direct and public prosecutors who work hard and deliver on the mandate, but that is being undermined, okay, by this particular blot. It is a blot, but it is a significant blot.
I hear what you're saying, but I want to clarify something, because we're saying something extremely serious here, that he is essentially saying that, according to what you said now, and then obviously there's going to be need to justify that he said the reason why he held, or rather made this decision, is because he was facing some kind of pressure. There was a proverbial gun to his head. Did he actually say these words?
He did.
He did.
On
national TV. I hope we can get the clip.
Yes.
He
There's
did.
a reason why I'm asking the question.
He did.
Things I may have seen, but I'm asking.
Yes.
There's a reason why I'm asking you to.
I am only
clarify.
quoting what he was aired
Yes.
on TV by. It was an interview.
I think it was on
with
KTN.
Sophie.
Yes.
Sophie Wanuna.
Yeah, it
Yes.
was on KTN.
Okay,
So
carry on.
maybe
Yeah.
can I just add something here, based on what you, just the reminder, the national reminder, a very key national reminder you have given, is the fact that he, by his own admission, has said that he was under extreme pressure in many of those cases to rush them to court without evidence. And yet, the ODPP Act, the decision to charge guidelines are very clear that before you take a case to court, you must ensure that there's enough evidence that it is as admissible and it can stand the test of trial. But other than that, even if you look, and I've mentioned already some specific cases where the manner in which the prosecution was conducted is quite suspect, and which shows that he was under influence and probably not objective. I've talked about the Geoffrey Mwangi case, the NHIF case. There's also the Lenau Kulal case. Remember the Samburu governor case?
Yes.
You remember in that flurry of withdrawals in September, on the day that 3 cases were to be, there was an application to withdraw cases. There were 3 cases. One of them was a Lonau Kulal case. But then after a lot of hue and cry, what's happening? Why are all these cases collapsing? He changed his mind after 2 days and said, no, we will continue with this case. After making an application to withdraw, to saying that there was insufficient evidence. In that case, I think 8 people had already taken the stand. But when you look at specifics in each of these cases, the pattern, the inconsistencies in terms of you make this decision and then goes 2 steps back. And that's why we're saying this is a person who has shown that he can cave under whether it is political or external pressure, but yet that office said that you must act in an objective manner without any direct or control by any external individual or authority.
Surely, this absolutism, where does it exist? I mean, we have very many independent officers in this country. How independent are they really? The moment you have an appointing officer and they appoint you, are you really independent? To be honest, whether it is in the judicial system, whether it is in the police service, our lived experience with independent officers in this country, how independent are they?
But the Chapter 15 of the Constitution provides for those independent offices.
They do.
And they require independence, because without that, then we will never live the dream of this Constitution. And city.
Yes.
We must hold anyone who applies for an independent office, before you apply for it, you must make sure that you're someone who is bold and you're able to stand for the public interest. By the way, for me, if you cannot do those 2 things, if you cannot stand for the public interest, then you have no business applying for a role in an independent office or even sitting in that office. So let us not say because of our setup, our political setup, that we should
our political reality, Sheila, reality.
It may be political reality, but let's contrast this with what has happened in the last 2 weeks. Certain people, including a principal secretary, have been fired, because of alleged acts of corruption. They are out of office immediately.
Without a thought. Yes.
Not a thought. But in addition to this particular appointment of the DPP, and I just want to read the principles of the NIS. It is a service which shall strive to achieve the highest standards of professionalism and discipline amongst its members, prevent corruption, and promote and practice transparency and accountability, comply with constitutional standards of human rights and fundamental freedoms, and train its staff to the highest possible standards of competence and integrity, and respect rights and fundamental freedoms and dignity. Then ensure there is diversity and an equitable Kenya. Okay, so that's the office where he's going. The current DPP, if he's vetted and approved, that's the office. Okay, and he must go in with integrity. As we do that, as a lawyer, I think to myself, Sheila has already said we if the cases were prosecuted, we would have gained 11 billion. Okay, now they have been withdrawn publicly with an explanation signed. There was no evidence. And a media confession, I had undue pressure. All these people are people with public profiles, big public profiles. Then let's decide they get a good lawyer who advises them. You are defamed. Based on the statements we have seen from the office of the DPP, you are defamed. Come claim your damages. You
can go to court to claim. Right.
Claim your damages from Kenyan tax money. The taxpayers are the ones who will need to pay. Okay? Remember, these ones in the Ministry of Health have moved away. Now, this is somebody who is ascending to an office, which will be very instrumental if we are to undertake such investigations. Okay? And try, and they would be advising, they would be at the center of it. That is why we feel it's very, very problematic for this particular appointment and many other appointments. The nominee for CBK, Thuge, again, was asked to step aside because of corruption. Charges. And you know, the bar for leadership and integrity is not with beyond reasonable doubt. It is with a doubt. With a doubt, refrain.
Right. So
that when Citi says there is no confidence, it's because we have allowed it over and over, starting from the political leadership, the president, the former president, the current president. They always bring us people who are so tainted. Okay, and we risk going back to where, like, if you think about the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, you remember previously we in my lessons I would learn about Bernard Chunga and what would happen when he was a Director of Public Prosecution. You never knew when you were guilty or not guilty, when it was just a political office, an office that is supposed to lead the cause of justice. Surely we must build confidence in the institution.
Very quickly, as the seconds takeaway is, what then does this petition entail, and what do we then expect? It's a conversation we have to keep unpacking, but literally in a few seconds, what does this petition then entail?
This petition, of course, as I said, we've laid clear grounds on the constitutional and legal foundation for this petition on why we hold that Mr. Nuruddin Haji should be removed from office based on non-compliance to Chapter 6 of the Constitution and various other laws, the ODPP Act, the Public Officers Ethics Act, and the Leadership and Integrity Act, based on gross misconduct, because we've said he's failed to exercise objectivity and impartiality in his role. And also for incompetence, we've laid the grounds on why we feel some of those cases should have been better handled. And based on that, what we have then asked the Public Service Commission is to institute the proceedings to have him removed from office. But other than that, because we know the time is short between the now and when he's expected to be vetted for this appointment to NIS, we have also prepared memoranda to Parliament, to the respective committee, that's the Defense, Intelligence and Foreign Relations Committee that will be vetting. And we are going to present these issues on his failures in the ODPP, in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions,
to see,
so that this can be considered. But what we are asking the President is rescind this nomination and give us a better candidate. There are many other Kenyans who are competent and have proven themselves. I don't know why we keep on recycling people who have continuously failed to to protect the Constitution. This country needs people who can stand for the Constitution. That is what it will take for us to be able to move forward, particularly even in reclaiming our economy.
Sheila Masinde, Executive Director of Transparency International, and Diana Gichengo, National Coordinator of the Institute of Social Accountability. Thank you for being here this morning. Conversations continue. It's 8:01.
Government works on fulfilling its campaign pledges. Mudavadi further stated that the government will going forward prioritize domestic resource mobilization in an effort to reduce reliance on non-concessional foreign borrowing. And former Turkana Governor Joseph Nanok has been invited by the Senate Investments Committee to shed light on the ownership of Lodwar Water and Sewerage Company. Senators are probing why the water company, partially owned by private entities, is yet to fold up 4 years after a law was passed prohibiting operations of public-private owned water companies. Nanok, who is the deputy head of the public service, is on the spot for allegedly failing to dissolve Lodwar Water and Sewerage Company in 2019 as required by the law. Additionally, the Senate Watchdog Committee wants the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission to conduct a forensic audit of the company's books. The Senate County Public Investment Committee has also invited the current Governor Jeremiah Lomurukai to give information on the ownership of the status of the water company that has been operating and procedurally since 2019. And the Anti-Corruption Court has ordered the 1.4 billion shillings graft case against former Kenya Ports Authority MD Daniel Manduku and his co-accused Juma Chigulu to proceed without further delay. Senior Principal Magistrate Victor Wahomile issued the order after dismissing Manduku's application, which sought the hearing to be adjourned due to his lawyer's unavailability. The accused have since denied the charges leveled against them. And the National Health Insurance Fund has mounted a crackdown on employers who do not remit their monthly statutory fund. This exercise aims to seal the gaps in revenue collection to ensure that the funds are uninterrupted. NHIF Acting Chief Executive Officer Sam Kuhora says the 3 weeks exercise targets to collect 712 million shillings in remittance out of 1.07 billion shillings, which is yet to be paid by employers. Speaking at the Tom Mboya Labour College in Kisumu during a consultative meeting with the Central Organization of Trade Union officials, Kuhora said the move would help clear pending bills and ensure NHIF beneficiaries continue to enjoy services at all the accredited facilities. According to Kuhora, 64% of the national insurance revenue comes from workers, adding that measures have been put in place to seal loopholes affecting collections. And police have arrested 2 suspects for allegedly being involved in the disappearance of 8 million shillings from a Kiambu-based businessman. According to his wife, who reported the incident, the money was stolen from a safe hidden at an abandoned pump station. Detectives say 2.5 million shillings has since been recovered from the 2 suspects. And ex-Mungiki leader Maina Njenga has cited bad politics in the latest claims by police that they found 2 firearms and over 90 rolls of bang in his home in Nakuru. Njenga says he's never owned a gun or used bang in his life, but believes the development part of a perceived power struggle in the Mount Kenya region. Police claim that they are looking for Njenga over claims of recovery of the items. And global independent oil and gas exploration and production firm Tullow Oil PLC has acquired complete control of the Turkana County-based project Oil Kenya Development following the withdrawal of its 2 joint venture partners. With the strategic exit of Africa Oil Corp and Total Energies from the project, Tullow will assume a 100% equity position subject to the government of Kenya's approval and will continue its work with the government and its host communities to make the region a significant energy-producing province, while reiterating the firm's commitment to progressing the development of the South Lokichar Basin project. Tullow Kenya BV Managing Director Madan Srinavasan disclosed that the firm is engaging strategic partners who have expressed an interest in the project based on its economic viability. This is Newswire. I'm Dennis Aseta. Good morning.
Good morning, 102.5 Spice FM, Kisumu.
When you're impeached, you're impeached. When you're sentenced, you're sentenced.
Madam Chief Justice.
Until the sentence is set aside.
Ukibeba vitu kwa roho utakufa. If you carry things in your heart, you will die.
You've had the luxury of living for 50 years and you cannot still explain yourself. Surely. Oh my God.
The reason for which you went to school and then gathered experience, that reason must be paid for.
All right.
Okay.
This level.
Shape up or ship out.
Levels don't change.
No.
It's about shipping out.
You know my business partner here.
Shipping out.
Are we talking about the ship in the bathtub? Or
the ship man?
Emmanuel Talam used to tell us a story of they were in school and they've been told to write composition about a ship. His classmate raises a hand. Teacher, are you talking about the ship or a ship goat?
The Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation.
Okay, a few minutes after 8 o'clock and we're looking at traffic. Different parts of the city, it continues and it's busy this morning. Are you coming off the Thika Superhighway? There's traffic there. Are you coming off of Waiaki going into the CBD? Looking at James Gishuru, extremely busy this morning. And we're in traffic hour proper. Normally happens right about 8 o'clock where everybody's just about to arrive where they're going or taking off from your destination. We saw rains in the eastern side of the country and so asking folks to move a little bit slower so that you get where you're going without any accidents. Mombasa, Malindi, rain is coming down in showers here and there, so please be careful. Coming back into Nairobi and looking in a westerly direction, traffic coming out of Westlands, and then we go a little bit north and we see traffic coming off of Kiambu Road and coming off of Limuru Road as well. Bumper to bumper in some parts, but you can use your service lanes. Use your bypasses too. Southern bypass is looking pretty good. Eastern bypass, not so much. It's clogging up as you're coming off of Outer Ring. All right, let's look in about half an hour and see how this has all changed. Then let's talk on Spice FM, KE on Twitter.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Online, mobile, and on radio. Twitter at SpiceFMKE. This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching
9
up,
minutes after 8
not
o'clock,
down.
Kenya's biggest conversation
This
continues. Where are you around the world in Kenya on our live streams on Facebook and YouTube? Thank you for joining us into the third hour of the show this morning, where conversations continue. Our audiences on KTN Home still with us, where we remind you that in June, we're looking at a new offering on KTN Home, from your soaps to your children's programs, cartoons, and your sports programs. Club Kiboko and everything else that you enjoy in entertainment taking on a brand new look come the month of June. It's KTN Home, just the way you like it. And even as you sit in front of your TV, think and imagine about being in a home that you can call your own. Thanks to Centum, I'm going to ask you to text 2 Rivers to 22365. And you have an opportunity to have a conversation about owning your home. And think about 1 to 2 bedroom units around the 2 Rivers area that have been put together just for you. Walk into your bank today and have a conversation with the Kenya Mortgage Refinancing Company and find out how you can get a mortgage at 8 to 9%. And the money you pay for rent today will start you on your journey to home ownership. Centum, 2 Rivers, 2235 Okay, getting into a conversation this morning about alternatives to taxation. Senator Eddie Oketch is having a conversation with us this morning, and he's already seated in the hot seat. And before we get into that this hour, let's hear today's Djiboutian proverb.
A wound inflicted by a friend does not heal.
A wound inflicted by a friend does not heal. Okay. Senator, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's another day that God has given us.
Yes.
Of course, still dealing with issues that are affecting us in the country.
Yes.
Among those, Shakahola problems are still going on. We're still thinking about lives that are lost there, as well as lives that are still stuck there that we're still trying to rescue. Of course, what we're going to discuss today about taxation, the issue of high cost of living in general, and how the next few weeks are going to look like, because we opened this session of Parliament yesterday. We just had our first session yesterday. Today is going to be our second day in this session, that parliamentarians are back to be able to try to make sense of the different challenges and opportunities that are facing Kenyans.
Okay.
And see what can be able to do.
Even as we get into the conversation, Senator,
yes,
I want to hear what you think about today's proverb.
A wound
inflicted by a friend
does
not heal.
Does not heal. Wow, that's a deep proverb, if I may use that. We're at times that trust is very important, because the basis for friendship is trust. And trust broods about what we call vulnerability. So if you have given somebody a space where they have won your trust, and sometimes they have also earned your vulnerability, and then they betray that, then I think that it becomes an image that is engraved in your mind forever.
Yeah.
And this is very critical, and I think even I can reflect on it as a politician. We serve in the context of trust given to us by the people with the vote.
Yes.
And if you're given that vote, because there is desperation, there is hopelessness, and in that hopelessness, there is hope in you to be able to solve my problems. If you go and I've given you that opportunity to serve me, and you're not serving me to the extent that I had these hopes on, and that is why I trusted you with my vulnerability, because I expressed it through a process of voting, then I can see how disenfranchised the mind becomes of the person who trusts the other. So it's actually true that to the extent that friendship is a function of trust that broods vulnerability, if you betray that, it becomes a memory that can never be erased.
Indeed. Okay. Senator Migori County, as well as the chair of the Shakahola Task Force.
I'm a member. I'm a member of the committee.
Member of the committee.
Yes.
Into the inquiry of the Shakahola. There's many names in this title.
Yes.
So many things happening as far as the eye can see. We're still looking into the details of the finance bill. When you were here last time, we're talking about alternatives to this heavy taxation, which clearly for many have said is not sustainable. And so that's part of the conversation that we want to have this morning. But even as we delve into that, you're the senator from Migori County. Yes. One would assume that you're from Migori County.
Yes.
But your name is Gisheru.
My name is Eddie Gisheru Okechi.
Okay. On a bit of a lighter note, we wanted to understand where that came from.
Oh, okay. That's a big challenge. I didn't prepare for this, but it's an emotional story. So I was born and raised in Migori, but in 2003 I lost my mother. So when I lost my mother, life was a little bit hard in the village. From where I come from, we were very big tobacco at that time.
Which part of Migori do you come from?
Uriri, all the way in a place called Ombo. But I've lived in and I'm going to tell you the story very, very quickly. But so when my mother died, we were a family that formed the basis, the bulk of tobacco farmers. And tobacco farming, sometimes kuna watu ambao tunasema ni agok. Wale you don't have enough capabilities to grow enough tobacco to have that number for BAT to be able to, figure out life by yourself. So you depend on other more established farmers. And that was a difficult life. So because of that, dropped out of school a little bit during that time, and then found my way into Migori town. Then I ended up living with a number of families who gave me opportunities to the extent that I found myself in Nairobi, stayed in Nairobi a little bit, in the back streets of Nairobi. And then in that, living in the streets here and there, trying to make a sense of the world, I ended up living with 7 families who supported me as foster families to go to school. And I really, really appreciate them. One, a lawyer in town who paid for my school fee. Another, a teacher in Migori town who also stayed with me for some time. And one of those was the Gisheru family.
Interesting.
That got me out of the streets and gave me a chance to be able to be who I am today.
Sure.
So that's the shorter version of the story. And I felt like because they took me back to school, it would be important that they are part of my life.
Who you are. It's a beautiful story, and also obviously contributing to your experiences and things that you then have learned. So here you are, Senator, and here we are having conversations about things that are affecting the nation's people. The finance bill front and center. No matter the things that we see that we want to dissuade us from that conversation, we're talking about essentially higher taxes on the people of Kenya who today are already suffering. We can try to sugarcoat it and call it something else, but that's the case.
Yes.
That the cost of living and the weight that it bears on the shoulders of Kenyans today is very heavy. And for all intents and purposes, from all indications, it doesn't look like it's getting better soon.
Yes.
So now with this bill coming in place, we're seeing that taxation is way up there in terms of what will be done to save the economy. But you seem to be of a different view. That there are other things that can be done while avoiding high taxation on a citizenry.
Yes.
What are those?
We start with the principle of taxation. The reason why government taxes its people or anybody who is in that economy is so that the government can run, and therefore the government can be able to, give what we call public goods. The goods that nobody would want to pay for, but want to enjoy. For instance, roads. If today you were to tell companies to come together and build a road for themselves, they wouldn't. But if you build it, they'll enjoy it. Security. Not everybody can provide security in the country. The government can. A number of organizational things that form the public goods. Sometimes education for people who are completely downtrodden and cannot afford education. Government can come in and be able to help. Water services. This number of services that do form bulk of spending. So it's critical that people pay taxes. And I want to be very objective today because I don't want to be seen as this person who is seen as the minority side that is just making noise. And to that extent, we appreciate taxation. But then taxation has to have a limit. And the reason why it has to have a limit is because you can tax people to the extent that now you destroy the economy and you destroy the lives of those people. In fact, the English definition of what violence is trying to develop a behavior of hurting, damaging, or killing people. The English definition of robbery is now when you apply any advantage of force to now take things that then lead to hurting, damaging, or killing people. For me, when you start overtaxing people beyond certain limit, then this is now we call robbery with violence, by definition. And I'm saying this because I think that is where the danger of where this bill is putting the state in. Basically, robbing Kenyans with violence, because you've got the mandate to be able to have autonomy of force. Why am I saying this? If you start taxing people to the point that you are touching on what we call disposable income, the little money they can spend on their basic needs. Today if you get 10 shillings as a mother in Kibra, it's a disposable income in the sense that you want to start debating these 10 shillings. Do I use to buy it aspirin for my kid, or do I use it to buy sukuma wiki? Because this is a basic survival need. If I start eating into that money, then now I'm maiming you from survival. I am hurting you, I'm damaging you, and I'm making it difficult for you to survive. Now, why is this government very keen on high taxation principle? Because in any government, there are two ways you can go when you are forming your policy on how you raise money for the government. One, you can choose to go the physical way. Physical policies are heavily dependent on what the National Treasury is advising you. So the Treasury is always looking at how do we control spending and raising money, okay? And if you're a government that focuses so much on that angle, then sometimes it becomes a problem. But you also have other thought, what we call monetary policies. Monetary policies are the people who in central bank who actually look at things like interest as a tool to control how the economy works and the economy raises money. The coming of this bill recognizes that the Treasury did give a policy, a budget policy statement that gave this government 700 billion worth of deficit. So the first thing before we start taxing is how can we go to that 700 billion and be able to make sure that we cut spending in that budget? Because right now the executive alone in that proposed budget has got 2.2 trillion that needs to go to the executive. That is the presidency together with the ministries. Now, let's take one ministry like Ministry of Health. Ministry of Health under the Constitution.
Ministry of Health, we have problems, but
yes,
we have scandal.
Crazy scandals. Okay. But the thing about it, in this budget policy statement, the Ministry of Health in the Constitution has only two functions. One is to develop health policies under Schedule 4. You can go and read it. And then number two is to take control of national referral hospitals. The rest of the other functions of healthcare have been devolved under Schedule 4, including primary health care, even in things like controlling ambulances, are with the counties. Yet the Ministry of Health today has been given over 100 billion worth of budget to control not more than 10 referral hospitals and to control policy angle. But counties are getting less than 1 billion each for running these other functions. Why can't we cut costs there? So the conversation must start with how do we cut cost on this deficit that is crazy, that is forcing the government to want to go and borrow and overtax Kenyans. Now, once you've done that, the government must understand that it's not in the business of creating jobs. The government is in the business of creating a conducive economy and environment for businesses to thrive. What does that conversation bring? That conversation brings about the issue of enhancing those opportunities in the context of making sure that there is saturated credit in the economy. Because if there's saturated credit in the economy, then you will be able to make sure that there's supply of money, and that supply of money will make businesses want to establish themselves because there is money to chase, and then you can now be able to get reasonable taxes within the limits. And that is a function of being able to control price in the economy. Pricing of goods that we are seeing having a problem in our economy. And what is the biggest price to control of the economy? Is interest rate. The interest rates in Kenya, and I've talked about this very, very, very profoundly, the interest rates in Kenya are very crazy. That makes it impossible to build a business and build capital for people in the lower part of the pyramid, as well as the people who are established businesses. If you can be able to control the interest rate, which is why I'm telling you that the government needs to lean more towards monetary policy to be able to make this economy work and be able to have reasonable taxes. If you don't do that, the keeping on taking from Kenyans even a single cent is just going to cause a crisis where businesses are going to close down and they're going to run to Uganda, Tanzania, and other places. And then at the end of the day, you will have what we call mutiny.
Okay. When you have sittings in Parliament, whether it's at the Senate level or it's at the National Assembly, in an oversight capacity, on a legislative capacity, in a representative capacity.
Yes.
This conversation that we are currently having right now.
Yes.
How does it take shape at the parliamentary level? That you have broken down this thing which should make sense to anybody who has an iota of sense, right? when these conversations are being had amongst the people who then take the oversight role, who take the representative role, and then make it into law, or that something comes before the table and a conversation is had about it, how does this happen? I mean, we know what it says according to the books, but when these deliberations are taking place, do they happen in the manner in which you are having them now?
There is informal networks and conversations that go in Parliament, which end up just being intellectual exercise.
For nothing.
And then there's the formal conversations, which end up being what are passed for people. Now, the unfortunate thing is that the formal conversations happen within the context of interest. And that interest in our parliament today has been reduced to the issue of majority versus minority, to the extent that anything bad that is happening in terms of laws that are being proposed, if they happen to have come from the majority side will pass them as they are, because they are betrothed to the executive. And this is why when you look at this as a mere conversations that are going on about the bipartisan talks, one of the issues that Azimio is not willing to let go, of course, the high cost of living is one which I've touched on and I can go back to a little bit. But one of the issues that is eminent in this conversation is the issue of democracy and not killing democracy. The idea that members of parliament have got a direct mandate from the people to be able to pass laws and create development within parliament and not being interfered with what we call an invisible hand in classical politics, whereby the state house uses some members to be able to control the house. And this is happening because there's this notion that has been coming out since this regime took over, that development comes from state house. Basically, if you translate it, it means that if you are an MP who is passing what the state house wants, then you're going to get favors by state house. Now that's the problem, because then it means that every single bad thing that happens, and I can assure you that we were here with my brother, the chairperson of finance in the National Assembly, and I'm also in the finance and budget Senate, and we discussed some very good ideas here. I can assure you that those ideas, including public participation, will not find themselves into the bill.
Remind us of some of those ideas. I mean, because yes, you did talk about some of the taxation that we're seeing coming on young entrepreneurs in the country.
Yes.
Talk to us about some of those ideas before we come back, and then the reasons as to why they will not pass.
Yes, they will not pass. That's a very easy one, because the executive wants this bill to pass as is, because he's seeing it as a jackpot of now just raising money from Kenyans anyhow. I talked about an idea like you want to tell somebody who is earning 500,000 and above that you're going to increase their income tax up to 35%, isn't it? But then you are saying that you do not levy any kind of taxes on external consultancy. What will happen? Any company, the people working for that company will say, hey, reduce my salary even to 150,000. Once you reduce my salary to 150,000, I'll go and register a company in Dubai, which is very, very easy to register, and I'll become a consultant. And then just import my services. Because
it is tax-free.
Because it's tax-free. I mean, I don't know whether this, sorry for being a motive, but I don't know whether this tax bill was written in some Airbnb place in Kileleshwa or somewhere, because it completely does not recognize the basis for which this economy runs. Look at what these taxes are looking at, things like profiling, things like human hair, fake human, what they call it, fake human hair, fake nails and stuff. You see, that's what I'm saying. This bill was written in an Airbnb somewhere by some people who maybe have interacted with some few slave queens, and then they think that they can profile something like human hair as a luxury good. Because in classical economics, for you to be able to tax these kind of things, you have to classify them as luxury goods. But you only put them as a luxury goods because of the people we interacted with. The bulk of salons in our country today employs the hustlers. If you go to Kenyatta Market today, what the braids that people are using there are not real human hair, they are fake human hair. But the lady who is there can only be able to make up to 200 bob in that work a day.
In a day.
If you go to Mutinda Market, these are the women that I look at every single day. They are in this industry. So if you choose to introduce tax on it because you're profiling it as a luxury good item, just because maybe you've interacted with 2 or 3 ladies who go to Nyeri Creative, who perhaps are paying 75,000 for their weaves, they don't form the bulk of people you're going to affect with this tax policy.
It's 29 minutes to 9 o'clock. Senator Ednah is in the studio with us this morning, and we're looking at alternatives to high taxation in the country as presented by the Finance Bill 2023. Now, question is, what will happen when it comes to this bill? Will it pass? Will it not? Will it pass as is? And look at the ramifications of that. Kenya's biggest conversation continues when we come off the break. Remind you that you can have a cuppa with Assis Tea. Kiptagich, the tea estates are saying that what we offer on a global stage is available right here in Kenya, and different variants produced right here in Kenya, available for consumption right here as well. From tangawizi to lemon tea to green tea, hibiscus and purple. What's your flavor? Tea as is. It's 29 to 9.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
This year's Kuza Awards are here, and we are banking on you to vote for us. All you have to do is SMS Kuza for free to 15601 and vote for Spice FM as your favorite station. Remember, voting closes on the 28th of May 2023.
Sunny conditions at 15 in Nairobi, highs of 23 today, and we'll see highs of 24 in a sunny Nakuru. It's mostly sunny at 15 in Nyeri, highs of 23, and we'll see highs of 24 in a sunny Eldoret at 15. At 25, sunny in Mombasa, highs of 30, and it'll go to highs of 30 as well in a sunny Malindi at 26 now that the rains have come to an end. It's 20 and sunny in Kisumu, highs of 29, and we'll see highs of 28 in a sunny Kakamega at 16. Kampala is cloudy at 19, highs of 28, and we'll see highs of 31 in a sunny Dar es Salaam at 25. At 9 degrees, it's clear in Johannesburg with highs of 23, and it's mostly cloudy at 26 in Lagos, going to highs of 31. 32 will be the high in a clear Kinshasa at 24. Continues in most parts of the city this morning. We're looking at traffic continuing on the Thika Superhighway. Not as bad as it was before, previously. It's now getting better. We're seeing a little bit of traffic then coming off of Langata Road. It's joining Raila Odinga, and so that's very heavy. Gong Road, also quite some traffic, and it's sending it all into the CBD this morning. And we're looking at Aerodrome Road, also taking some of that off, going out towards Upper Hill and then into the CBD. All right. The Likoni interchange, then trying to join with the Southern Bypass, has quite some traffic. All of this coming off of Gong Road and trying to get away from that in one way or another. Thika Superhighway still have some traffic there, and we're looking at Ring Road Westlands, Waiyaki Way, James Gishuru, all that pretty busy. Limuru Road seems to be the busiest of them all right about now, taking off traffic coming in from Ruaka and off the Village Market. We'll see how that pans out in a short while. Let us know about where you might be stuck this morning. We'll spread the word on Spice FM KE on Twitter.
Chilled Spice. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
9 o'clock, Kenya's conversation in having a conversation this morning about the alternatives to taxation. We're in the studio this morning with Migori County Senator Ednah and having conversations about what would be some of the alternatives that we speak of. You presented the problem, Senator. We see the problem.
Yes.
Nobody can run away from what Kenyans are talking about today. It's already very difficult. I mean, here's an example. You go to the supermarket or whatever market with a denominator of 1,000 shillings. It is impossible to purchase what you did with 1,000 shillings 1 month, not a year,
Yes.
1 month ago today,
Yes.
impossible to purchase what you would with 1,000 shillings today, even 500.
Yes.
Because things have increased in terms of cost. Now, it is on the back of that the introduction of this bill comes, where we cannot run away from the fact that taxes will increase. Fuel will go from 8% to 16% in VAT. We are looking at a number of, and fuel, even if nothing else is taxed, fuel alone doubles in terms of its VAT value. Everything else will be affected as a result of that. Transport will go up, food will go up, and because of that, we'll see that the cost of production will go up, because you have to move things from point A to B. Just in case anybody didn't understand the connection between the two. Now, you are saying that it is possible to have alternatives to some of these things. We talked about the beauty industry just a few minutes ago, and there's looking at taxation of some of these things deemed to be luxury items. Given that one example, say, okay, look, this doesn't make sense. What would be the alternative? Because at the end of the day here, government is looking for money to survive, to run the country.
Yes.
What would be the alternatives that we are looking at here in these conversations that you have at parliamentary level?
Yes. First of all, I told you that the conversation we are having in parliamentary levels, the informal ones are important but immaterial to the extent that they can change people's lives in Kenya. Because at the end of the day, parliamentarians are going to vote according to the interests of their political factions. And unfortunately, right now, the majority in parliament is the faction that is also with the State House.
Okay.
And then the majority in the National Assembly and Senate are both from the other side. So they will pass this bill the way the State House wants it. And that's very unfortunate because of the fact that under Article 4 of the Constitution, the MPs and the senators are given that power to be able to control, interrogate, and then re-examine budgets. Unlike before the multi-party democracy, when we used to have dictatorial regimes that then forced MPs to do what they wanted. But that said, I think that there is need not really a discussion of alternatives. It's a discussion of the quote that we started with today. The idea that if your friend inflicts any wound on you, it becomes a permanent thing that you cannot forget. This regime came to power on the basis of solving what it called the hustler menace. So, economic menace, the basic problems in the hustler nation. Now, if you come with that agenda, then you must stimulate the economy as the first thing. Okay, and we can go through it one by one. For instance, if you look at something like Fuliza, because this is I want to be scientific in terms of as there's a model that has worked, and what was it working for?
Right.
And then what does the government borrow from this to be able to help a hustler? If you look at Fuliza is actually an overdraft that is supposed to help a bulk of people who are doing small businesses be able to survive. But if you look at Fuliza statistics, the heavy part of the borrowing in Fuliza, 68% actually to be precise, are borrowing between 1 shillings and 100 shillings. That means that they're not borrowing to go and do business. They're borrowing that money to buy Panadol. They are borrowing that money to eat.
And it's not about what their limit is?
Yes. No, they have that limit as well, because I'm talking about the bulk of the society.
Right.
If the fact that they're borrowing that 100 bob, I can assure you that this is mtu wa Mjengo who has gone to Mjengo and is waiting for their pay in the evening, but they want to get chapati madondo so that they can be able to survive and keep on working. So they borrow that 100 bob. In the evening, they're paid 500 bob. They pay the 100. That is 68%. It should concern you as a government, because this is a statistic that is available to you. 22% of the borrowers in Fuliza borrow between 100 shillings and 500 bob. This is now a hustler who is trying to not just borrow to eat, but borrow to get transport to get to town and go and work. Are you seeing? So we already have up to almost 80% in Fuliza that is borrowing not to invest in any business, but is borrowing to survive, to facilitate themselves.
Yes.
Then You get another 4% that is borrowing between 500 and about 1,500. And if you study Fuliza very well, it is only 1% that is borrowing between 2,500 to 75,000. That includes people like maybe us who use Fuliza as an exchange platform where I didn't have money, let me just facilitate somebody to go somewhere, I can be able to afford 20,000 or 30,000.
Yes.
Why is this statistics important? Because when this government came with something called Hustler Fund, it basically copied Fuliza and then started giving hustlers 500 shillings as a limit you can be able to borrow, up to 1,000. What is the alternative to taxation? The alternative to taxation is you must be able to saturate this economy with credit that makes sense to the hustler.
That is affordable.
Okay? And how is that credit based? You must assess what are the assets that make sense for a hustler to start making money that they can be able to be stable. Okay? And those assets sometimes are very simple, but the government does not understand them. Let's start with wheelbarrow. Right?
Does not understand them?
Because the wheelbarrow was the movement that this government got into office with. How much is a wheelbarrow today in Kenya? The low-frame wheelbarrow goes for 4,000. The high-frame wheelbarrow goes for 9,500. Now, if you're telling a hustler who wants to own a wheelbarrow to do work in town here, to buy a wheelbarrow and they can only borrow in a hustler fund, 500 bob, it is impossible for them to build that asset. What is the cost of mkokoteni in Nairobi? If you're getting a second-hand mkokoteni, is 17,500. When will a hustler ever save and be able to buy a mkokoteni? What is the cost of a tank, 3,000 liters tank, that a hustler can be able to use to actually be able to have a car wash? It is 19,500. Okay? The bulk of hustlers in this country today, Andrew, are border riders. If you look at border riders today, for them to acquire their basic asset to be able to survive is a motorbike. The cost of motorbike, because of all these taxes today, the simplest one that is actually commonly even used in Nairobi,
yes,
TVX model, LX 150 model. That TVX goes for 160,000 today in the market. And you're telling this hustler to borrow 500 bob from Hustler Fund. You are not figuring out the credit that can be able to oil this economy. And then what you do is now you put this hustler in serious debt levels that they cannot be able to manage, and they don't have a disposable income. You see, for instance, if you go and look at how these hustlers, and actually there are 1.5 million people in Kenya today that are owning borders, the biggest workforce,
yes,
to be honest. If you go and look at how what to credit is giving them the asset to acquire. Number one, they have to pay 23,000 upfront as a deposit. They have to pay another 20,000 for what they call facilitation fees for getting something like insurance on short-term trackers, so that their motorbikes are not taken away. And then in a day, this introduces them to a bill that is almost 180,000 worth of credit.
Yes,
that now they have for what. So it means that every single day they have to pay what to credit 800 shillings. Okay. Now, this border person is going to work in an economy where the maximum they can be able to do, because people now don't want to get even on borders because the cost of fuel has affected the price of getting into that border. Yep. Fewer people are getting to use the borders even at night. These guys can now only make up to 2,000 bob in a day. That 2,000 bob, 800 already goes to what to credit for the next 2 years. Okay, that in fact that alone exposes them the question of interest to about 60% worth of interest. That's what I was telling you, that you have to solve the interest equation. The moment they have been able to pay 800 bob, now they start looking at how do they remove the fuel that they have used in the entire day. Okay, how do they service this border? A border person who is now forced to work day and night in Nairobi goes home with 300 bob. Now your 300 bob, now this regime wants to look at it as an aggregate income, because if you take that 2,000 bob that they have made in a day, basically you are saying that they have made 60,000 bob in a month, isn't it?
Yes.
As a gross income. And therefore, they can easily fall into the 500,000 category of people who are making annualized gross income. And then you want to tax that 300 bob again up to a certain level. I mean, What are we doing?
Let me ask you this question, Mheshimiwa.
Yes.
All these things that we talk about with regards to the finance bill,
yes,
we focus very much on the taxation.
Yes.
I'm going to ask this question, but I do not want you to respond to it now. What else is in this bill that is actually offensive? Because the taxes seem to have taken center stage.
Yes.
But this looks like an omnibus bill where there are other things inside that particular bill that we're not talking about, and they could have far more reaching consequences.
Yes.
But the question I want you to respond to is, when you look at all these things, what does it tell you about the thought process of those who are ruling right now? What does it tell you?
I'm gonna be bold here. You know, sometimes boldness has got some genius in it, can put you in trouble or not. It tells you that your leaders that you have elected today have gone to enterprise in government.
Meaning?
They are going to make money in government. They're not going to serve. Okay? Because some of these things, and I think, Ndu, we talked about this the other day, about some of the things that are put in place are meant to actually cushion, some of the people who are in power while injuring people who are not in power, right? Because if you look at the issue of tax evasion, I talked about it this other time, that if you have got some serious taxes that, let's say KRA has said that you owe me this number of taxes, then immediately I expose you to 20% charge on that, as we are having this case somewhere. What does that make of our criminal justice system? You know very well that today, if somebody was working in government, running a big government, and the KRA was to face them with the same kind of fine as the case is going on, think about a business that whose turnover is about, let's say, 20 million. Okay? 20% of that is literally a big chunk of that business.
Yes, 40 million.
But the people who are in government, who are running big businesses, will now be subjected to that. So it becomes the biggest way to actually evade taxes and be able to make more money. Now, think about a system whereby this money, and my brother Kimani talked about it the other day, that it works the same way. You'll be charged some bond in court. You know, in court system, nobody will remove that money. But this is not a court process. So if I charge you that kind of money and I drag your cases forever and ever, where does that money sit? In an economy that we know that people can take that money, trade with it, do business with it. Because if I take 4 million from you today as a business, that's a big part of your cash flow. But if I take it and drag your case in a justice system that takes 2 years to solve that tax equation,
you can't do anything with it.
I can't do anything in it, but somebody has enterprised with that money. So the problem that we have as a country is that getting into government has become more lucrative than running a business. Because you find some of the richest Kenyans today are people who have been in government and in political spheres. They have never run businesses before. We don't know any innovation that they did that you say that this was a very big innovation, like you develop an application that Facebook bought as X amount of dollars, but they're billionaires in the country. So it makes corruption endemic, because everybody who goes there wants to go there and get something and eat it. So that even the laws that some people are passing are not looking at the common mwananchi and helping mwananchi, but looking at how does this law help me enterprise. In what you have said, things we are not seeing.
And yet, when individuals stood on the roofs of vehicles, they let Kenyans know that it was for their interest that they are going into Parliament, into the Senate, which serves an oversight, it serves in an oversight capacity. Then one would wonder then that you meant to be taken seriously when you come back and say, I want to go and represent you, so that when we make laws, they're for your protection. When another round comes, would you expect that Kenyans would then say, actually, yes, please, let us give you the opportunity, whereby there was an opportunity to essentially save Kenyans from this livelihood-eating menace that presents itself in bills and yet doesn't happen? So then I think it leaves many a Kenyan confused here, that for whose representation, for whose interest then are people in parliament?
Interesting. And also for whose interest are people in State House? Because sadly the power that State House wields is very, very serious, to the extent that if parliamentarians are vulnerable to it, it does affect them. And it is sad, because for me, sometimes I even take just simple understanding of things. We talked about something that is called the housing levy, and I saw one of the people from the National Housing Corporation arguing it out in a way that was convoluted, but it is okay. If you do not understand the causes and the manifestation of plight of very, very poor Kenyans, you can't help them. It's as simple as that. If you bring something like somebody, and I told you, like I did for you the math of the Mama Mboga, the math of the saloonist who is working in Mutinda Market, who forms the bulk of people who do not have any other opportunity but being in that salon and earn 300, 400 bob. The reality of a motorcycle person, a boda person who earns 2,000, but by the time they're going home, they're going with 300 bob. And that 300 bob, they're going with it home at 4 in the morning because they have to work the whole day. Through the night. When they get home, their wife now feels like you are earning a lot of money, you have gone to see some mbango wa kando. There's now social issues that starts in this house between the husband and the wife. People are fighting in these homes. We have got broken families. That if you don't understand that, then you cannot be able to help them. But if you don't understand even more critically their modes of operation, for instance, if you don't understand that because there is high cost of credit in this country that makes it impossible even for banks to loan these hustlers, makes it impossible for even these funds that you're creating, like hustler funds, to meet their basic take-off capabilities, then you start having problems, because you forget other people who become alternative lenders who are genuinely helping these people without knowing that they are lenders. For instance, let me just finish this thought process. The biggest lender to these hustler nations today is not hustler fund. And it's not bank for obvious reasons of the interest equation that I was talking about. Their biggest lender is Mutua Kiosk. Okay? Because when they wake up in the morning and they had only 300 bob, the kid who wants to go to school wants pencil and a book. And the wife wants some small money to buy water kwa mtungi, hapo Kibera. Then your pesa imeisha. And he also want to get fuel to go back to his work as a boda person. What does he do? In the morning before the kid goes to school, which is also a local school, dusty school around, he sends the kid to mama wa kiosk. Mwambie kwa ile kitabu yangu anaandikie 10 shillings. Anaandikie mayai. Anaandikie unga. So then the kiosk becomes the biggest debt holder for these people. What does that mean as an economy? We have reduced our people to borrow to eat. And you still want to take money from them, in terms of, you are saying that I want to take this 300 bob from them, which I told you that if you take 300 bob from somebody who is earning 300 bob in terms of net income, you've taken all his money. But even if you take it from somebody who is even formally employed and is earning 10,000, and the employee is also giving 300,000, they are 300 bob in equation, then there only can be a saving of up to 216,000 in 15 years, which is the maturity time for mortgage in Kenya. Okay? So you have basically eaten into disposable income for these people, which for them is equivalent to savings as well.
Mheshimiwa, there's something that I'd like to ask.
Yes.
Because your job is a county job.
Yes.
I grew up in an era where people like my grandparents, who were subsistence farmers, were able to feed themselves.
Yes.
And because some of us lived in town, some of what they produced, we also ate in town. Now, let's talk about Migori. The bulk of the land in Migori is arable. It is land that you can farm well. I know because I worked in Migori.
Yes.
Would you say that if county governments focused on ensuring that the people can feed themselves, nothing as esoteric, nothing fancy, just making sure people can actually eat? Because even as we speak now, Many people who survive in town here in Nairobi survive because people send them food from home. Okay? So even when they talk about the cost of even that unga that they eat, it's taken to a portion mill, it's transported here.
Yes.
What can county governments do
to make sure people can eat?
Yes, so that if this basic is taken care of, one, people will be healthier. The costs that go to healthcare will be reduced. But it also means that from what they eat, whatever remains can form part of capital creation. Something basic, because everything that you've said indicates that what this current government or even the previous government, their focus is not on helping the mwananchi who elected them into the positions of authority. So the county governments are governments. Can they take over this role and look after their people, because they are also elected to now look after their people at that level?
The truth is they can. But the problem is the functions that have been devolved, that are given to county government, there is unwillingness by the national government to give county governments money. I am in Senate right now, and I am struggling, among other senators, to make sure that the Treasury can even give counties money that they still owe counties. There is much has not been given to counties. In fact, some of the counties like Nyeri have gone on are going on a shutdown tomorrow. April has not been paid to them, and the reason is the Treasury is leaning towards the executive, such that the national functions are more prioritized than the county functions. And you know, when these county functions are not funded, what happens is that the natural thing that a governor will do and its executive is to go and again borrow. And then that brings a lot of other pending bills and interest rates that are higher, and fines that then makes it impossible for these county governments to be sustainable. So the first one is the goodwill to be able to solve the issue of sending money to counties. But you've talked about something very important, which is the issue of agriculture. The national government still has got a big hold by influencing parliament.
And yet it's devolved, is it not?
Exactly, it's devolved.
Yes.
But even the policies that we are having are problematic. That's why you said, is there something in this financial bill that is hidden? Let me give you a good example. You see, the way you grew up in the village is also the way I grew up in the village. But during our time, my grandmother and my mother had control over their seeds. They would go harvest, then they take the seeds that are going to be good seeds, put it somewhere there, and then Moshi will protect the seed. When they go and replant the seed is still proper in terms of soil acidity, as well as microorganisms are dealing with that seed. So we never used to have poor seeds. We had what we call seed sovereignty, to the extent that you have got control over your production. Today, we have got seeds that we don't control. Why? This government policies at the national level want to control the policies that are making our seeds to make it profitable for Monsanto, to make it profitable for Syngenta. And Syngenta and Monsanto will only produce seeds that can only be a one season seed. Then it becomes an enterprising that has increased
every
soil
season
seed.
You have to get more,
buy more seeds. So as a country, we don't have control of even our seed sovereignty. Why? That thing that you're talking about, what you're not seeing in these bills, the enterprising element, that if I give Monsanto and I give Syngenta business, then somebody who is in power, I'm going to make money and my people are going to die. This is the problem.
Senator.
And this thing goes all the way up to even milk.
Right.
You see the kind of rules. My mother, had one cow that she would milk. We used to spend that. We used to call the cow Nyaroka.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, my grandmother sold it when I was going to African Leadership Academy. But that one cow, I used to spend 8 hours of my time every day with that cow, grazing and looking for pasture. And then when that cow gave about 4 liters of milk, my mother was used the 2 liters in feeding us in the family, and my grandmother as well. And then the 2 liters, they'll take it to the nearest school, and then they get payment at the end of the day. Then you bring rules that want to control the kind of milk that can be sold to people. What are you doing?
Now
you're killing the grassroots economy.
Nyaroka today is the Kenyan citizen, and it is our hope. It is our hope that the representation at this level continues to be that protects the people and not a matter of
absolutely.
Senator Eddie Okech, Migori County Senator, thank you so much for being here with us this morning.
Thank you.
The conversations continue. It's 9 o'clock.
Thank you so much.
Of government services. It further noted that Kenyans will be able to easily access close to 5,000 state services after the launch. ICT Cabinet Secretary Elido Aldo stated that the government does not intend to reintroduce the Huduma number, instead noting that the state will consult stakeholders to arrive at a broadly acceptable and advanced ID. He added that the government will provide the necessary policy and regulatory environment for technology and innovation companies to support its quest for smart registration. The Azimio la Umoja leader Raila Odinga has accused the government of failing to construct dams on River Nzoia, Yala and Nyando respectively to contain the perennial floods in Lake Victoria Basin. Speaking at Siagonjo Stadium in Budalangi during the distribution of relief food to flood victims, the former Prime Minister stated that the plan to construct the dams on the flooding rivers could have reduced the suffering of the people. He observed that the waters from dams could also be used for irrigation to produce enough food and export the surplus. Busia Governor Paulo Toma noted that the Lower Nzoia irrigation project will be an economic game changer through the increment of land acreage under rice from 3,000 to 20,000. Budalangi Member of Parliament Rafael Wanjala urged the government to consider constructing 4 dams in Nyanza and Western Province among the scheduled construction of the 100 dams. On the other hand, the minority leader in the National Assembly, Opiyo Andai, has demanded the government charge high-ranking officials behind the theft of the condemned sugar and Kenya Medical Supplies Agency KEMSA scandal on mosquito nets. He threatened to name the officials next week if the government fails to take action. And Central Organization of Trade Union Secretary General Francis Atwoli has voiced his support for the formation of a Health Risk Commission to oversee the human resource challenges currently facing the health sector. Speaking during a consultative forum between workers' unions and the National Health Insurance Fund in Kisumu, Atwoli pointed out that counties had so far proved their inability to manage health workers' affairs, prompting intermittent strikes that hamper service delivery to the people. The sentiments come amidst a brewing war between the Council of Governors and the national government, with the COG fighting to retain autonomy of their health function, arguing that counties are operating within the confines of the constitution in running their respective affairs in the health sector. On his part, NHIF Board Chairperson Michael Kamau assured the workers of the government's commitment to actualize the Universal Health Coverage Program, urging them to throw their support behind the NHIF Act amendments regulations. And Kirinyaga Governor Anne Waiguru has released 53.2 million shillings to fund 146 farmers groups to undertake various value chains projects as she launched county's 5-year development plan. The funds will be shared by farmers groups undertaking tomato, dairy, avocado, poultry, beekeeping, fish, pig and dairy goat farming, among others. Waiguru says the projects under the Wezesha Kirinyaga Empowerment Program aims to empower the beneficiaries to make at least 1,000 shillings per day from the various value chains. And Nairobi Governor Johnson Sakaja has signed the Twin Cities Agreement with the Mayor of Cape Town, Alderman Hill Lewis. The signing of the agreement will see Nairobi City and the City of Cape Town in South Africa collaborate in various sectors. Speaking during the signing of the agreement at City Hall, Governor Sakaja said Nairobi and Cape Town stand as great regional hubs of the African continent. And 100 students from Rapogi School in Uriri in Migori have been diagnosed with flu-like symptoms, sending panic at the institution. Confirming the incident, the senior principal, Erastus Nyagwa, said the students showing signs of dry cough and flu were taken to various hospitals within the county for further test and treatment. He said COVID-19 has been ruled out after tests conducted returned negative. It was however feared it could be suspected influenza outbreak. However, 2 students who were diagnosed with malaria were admitted at St. Joseph's Ombaso Hospital as the entire school staff and students remained under observation. Nyagwa is appealing to other schools to take precautions to avert such an outbreak. And a body of a 21-year-old man who recently drowned while trying to swim in River Sagana has been found. The body of Alex Monday was found floating inside Kengen Dam, some 10 kilometers away from where he drowned. I'm Dennis Aseto. Good morning.
94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Okay, at 5 after 9 o'clock, we're looking at traffic continuing in different parts all around the city. Seems to be dwindling much better than it was earlier this morning. Traffic hour, we can say, essentially is coming to an end. Yes. A little bit on Rilo Odinga Way. It's going out towards the city stadium, city mortuary roundabout. And there's incoming traffic on Gong Road towards the CBD. It's reduced significantly coming off of Thika Superhighway. So yay. Wednesday morning now starting just to get into the rhythm of things. And the traffic situation probably won't be too much of one to contend with from here going on out. All right, what are we looking at? That's still probably a bit of a problem. A bit of traffic on James Gishero going towards that drift out towards Waiyaki Way. But the Red Hill Link Road looks good if you want to use that as a scenic adventure into the city. We're looking at some traffic also then coming in from North Airport Road, heading out then towards the Eastern Bypass. Apart from that, I think we should be able to get through this without too much of an issue. Let's talk and see in about half hour how things are looking. Spice FM KE on Twitter.
This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start.
Welcome, and as we get into the final hour of Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room this Wednesday, coming into our final conversation for today, we kick off the hour reminding you that you can have some of the best tea coming out of Kenya, grown here, packaged here in different varieties, not sent out and brought back in a way that you can consume it, but all of that done right here on Kiptagich Tea Estates in Kurosoi South District. And they bring you as is tea, whether it's the lemon variety or masala or tangawizi, purple tea, hibiscus tea, all of that made right here for your, what do we say? Drinking pleasure.
Yes.
That one.
Not just pleasure, you're drinking enjoyment and pleasure.
Exactly. Have a cup of that today and experience what the rest of the world would experience in a package right here in Kenya. All right. Our conversation this hour is on biodiversity. Okay, big word, linguistic gymnastic things about to start happening. But all right, before we get into that, let us hear this today's proverb from Djibouti.
Yes. Right. A wound inflicted by a friend does not heal. Simple, straightforward. A wound inflicted by a friend does not heal. What do you think the Djiboutians were trying to say?
A wound inflicted by a friend does not heal.
I think they were trying to say that a friend can really hurt you deep because the bond you have with your friend, goes beyond the superficial. So it will not only hurt the body, but it will hurt the heart.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Those deep words are coming from the voice of Olivia Viambo, who is a project officer, Civil Society Partnerships and Policy, WWF Kenya. Olivia, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Situation Room. I know I told you we are friends and we're having a conversation, but you're actually in the hot seat of the Situation Room. So Karibu, don't worry, warm things up for you just a little bit. And we're having a conversation this morning about the impact of biodiversity loss. Okay, let's just do a rewind.
Big word?
Yes. Like I said, linguistic gymnastics about to take place. Look, let's start from the beginning and say, okay, let's establish this somewhere.
Yeah.
What is biodiversity? do we have it? Do we buy it in the shop? Then when we say loss, why don't we have it anymore?
Or do you grow it?
You grow this biodiversity somewhere.
What does the tree look like, or what does the plant look like?
Thank you for having me in the show. Let me just take a step back and let our audience know that this week on May 22nd, the world celebrated International Biodiversity Day. The theme of this year was From Agreement to Action, Building Back Better. So it is a big word. It is a global buzz. But in simple terms, biodiversity is the variety of plants and animals that we find in nature. And nature, we know that it is your surrounding. So this variety differs from place to place depending on where you are. So you could be in a mountain region. The variety of plants and animals would be different from somebody who is in the asal areas of, say, Isiolo or Marsabit. And all of this variety plays an important role in how the earth stays in balance. So when you remove one aspect of this variety that I'm mentioning, then the earth's balance begins to tilt. Yeah, so that is biodiversity in simple terms. I hope I haven't spoken too scientifically.
And in simple terms, are you saying that an imbalance exists?
In simple terms, I'm saying an imbalance exists when we remove something from the balance.
All right, let me ask my question again.
Yes.
Are you then saying,
yes,
for you to have a conversation about biodiversity, it means the diversity and the balance that you expect is either under threat or it doesn't exist? Because if there was no imminent threat, what are we discussing?
Biodiversity is under imminent threat globally and in Kenya. And the causes of this threat are largely driven by our behaviors as humans. We have converted natural spaces into settlement, into agriculture, land, into infrastructure such as roads, airports, railways, and ports. And so through those activities, we have cut down trees, we have changed habitats where animals live in order for us to, quote unquote, modernize our lives. Our survival or our day-to-day consumption comes from the environment, from nature. So our food, our clothing comes from nature. But what we have done over the years is that we have overexploited our natural resources in order for us to meet our needs. And this again has led to the loss in biodiversity. And the third aspect of the threat to biodiversity is pollution. So after we have consumed, after we have used, we dump our waste carelessly back to the environment. We have plastics that are clogging our waterways and our river and lake systems. We have waste that is found literally everywhere we turn, in our cities, in our villages. And so that has led to the loss in biodiversity and in natural spaces.
Okay. You talked about something, and if we talk about development, the race towards industrialization that needs to happen for quite a number of nations today, inadvertently would affect the biodiversity index in a lot of these. So you're stuck in a catch-22, if you ask me. What do? Do you industrialize? Do you go towards modernity? Or do you say, okay, actually, you know what? Let us maintain these spaces. Let us maintain clean rivers. Let us maintain these open spaces where flora and fauna can thrive. Or is there a balance that can be struck between the two?
Yes, indeed. Biodiversity is not the enemy of development or of progress. The two can coexist. Development and nature can coexist with proper planning. I think in Kenya we have land use plans at national level and at county level that outline where and how we should use our our land and our spaces. So we find that, for example, there are certain areas that we should demarcate for forests. There are certain lands that can be demarcated for agriculture and certain spaces that can be demarcated for settlement and other activities that relate to industrialization. But a lot of times these plans are really made but kept in the shelves. So in the race to develop or in the race to industrialize, we ignore these plans. We ignore that there are strategies in place that can actually allow us to coexist with nature. Secondly, with modern developments, we find that there are options of industrializing without affecting our natural systems. We have new energy sources that do not have to necessarily affect our environment. We have renewable energy sources from solar, from wind, from geothermal power that can power our industries and at the same time limit the waste that goes into our environment. There are infrastructural designs that are coming up that do accommodate natural spaces. Our roads can be built in a way that trees can also grow alongside the roads. Plants can also thrive alongside our railway lines and so on and so forth. So it's a matter of planning. It's a matter of having a paradigm shift in the way we know development and learning lessons from countries that have degraded their biodiversity at the expense in the name of development.
So what does it do? So we're talking about the impact of this loss on the environment, on countries, on nations. What is that impact? Because what is it? Okay, so a bunch of trees were cut down. So what, right? But we have a building that is standing in that place today. Okay, so rivers are dirty, we can clean them up, right? But it's a little bit more than that lackadaisical attitude, isn't it? What impact does this loss have on us today that perhaps we don't see right now?
Thank you for that question. I think that is not the heart of the matter. Our very existence depends on nature. The air that we breathe comes from nature. The water that we drink, I'm having a bottle of water beside me here, comes from a river catchment. The food that we eat comes from pollinators, the bees and the birds that help pollination to happen so that our fruits, our vegetables are produced. So if we continue to ignore this threat of biodiversity loss, then it means that our very existence is threatened because once you do not have clean water to consume, then it means that we'll continue to experience disease outbreaks. We'll continue to have water shortages, yet life itself depends on water. Without proper clean air to breathe, we'll continue to have respiratory problems. Without food, who can exist without food? Sure. So biodiversity is really the thread that ties human existence. And so we cannot continue to ignore this problem. We cannot continue to think of it as a science problem because a lot of this has been communicated in a science way. And I hope me being here helps to unpack the science into a very simple language so that we're able to appreciate that if we do not take action now, our children and our children's children may not enjoy the simple pleasures we enjoy of a fruit, clean air, clean water.
Can I ask this question?
Yeah.
In this country, this lovely country of ours, Kenya, do we have legal frameworks? Do we have constitutional framework? Do we have the law that enables those who are in authority to ensure that what is desired is actually brought into being?
Yes, indeed, we do have laws. Our 2010 Constitution provides for the right to a clean and healthy environment. And that was a groundbreaking provision globally because not many countries recognize environment at that level. We have laws that touch on biodiversity. For instance, we have Forest Conservation and Management Law. We have Environmental Management Coordination Act. We have Climate Change Act of 2016. So the laws are in place. Our government has made sure that the laws are in place. I think the challenge is, to what extent are we implementing these laws? To what extent are we going back to the rule of the law and say, this is what needs to be done, or this has been done, and these are the penalties that need to be taken into need to be implemented to ensure that our biodiversity is safeguarded. Yeah.
There's some very heartwarming, pleasing conversations that is had with regards to this country when we talk about renewable energy and how it is when we compare ourselves to the rest of the human beings who inhabit this planet. We are really way ahead. Okay, now, alongside that conversation, there's one about planting trees. You know, this one I'm asking because it confuses me.
Yeah.
See, how many trees do we actually need to plant so that we don't have a problem with pollution, greenhouse effect, and all the other things that climate change, warming, and all these other things that one keeps hearing about? Because it's clear to me that since I was taught photosynthesis in primary school, these plants and trees are supposed to help with this. And clearly, if there's a problem, then it means there aren't enough trees. Or does this problem go beyond trees?
Yes and no. So planting of trees is a big part of reversing biodiversity laws, and our president has committed to planting 15 billion trees in the next 5 years, and I think that's a very commendable commitment coming from the billion. Yes,
no, has nine zeros.
Billion trees.
Yes,
trees.
Yes, it's a very commendable commitment because we need.
How many have we planted so far since you made that statement?
I do not have the statistics here with me, but I know that since the rain season began this year, there's been quite a lot of concerted efforts.
Let me do a little math
to restore our forests.
If we want to plant 15 billion trees, and we want
in
to make
in 5 years,
then it means we need to be planting 3 billion trees every year.
Yes.
Is that not so?
And how many are we in Kenya currently? What is the population of Kenya?
Kenyans, I think we're around 50 million.
Yeah,
50
close
million.
to 50 million.
So do that math against 50 million. How many people, how many trees every individual needs to plant per year?
You know, when you talk population, please remember some people don't even know trees exist because of their age.
And that is why you're having this conversation today. Why don't we start a campaign and encouraging each and every individual to plant at least 10 trees.
Super. I love what you're saying now. Tell me.
If every Kenyan would plant 10 or 20 trees a year, we definitely meet that target.
I am in complete agreement with you. But let me ask the question. The bulk of our population are young.
Yes.
What are the efforts we are making to ensure that part of the school-going process is one of planting trees?
A lot of a big part of our population is young people, and that is a plus in this biodiversity discussion because young people have not only the energy but the innovation to actually bring about the change that we need. In terms of tree planting, we can dedicate spaces in our schools and in our education institutions for tree growing. We can encourage children to plant trees during their birthdays. So instead of having cake or alongside having cake for your birthday, why don't you buy 20 seedlings every year to just commemorate your birthday, and it will be there until you grow old, and your children and your children's children will be able to appreciate that you were able to plant this number of trees. But let me get back to the solution. So it's not all gloom and doom. I think sometimes when you hear about these threats and what it means for the future generations, a lot of us cring and think that the world is coming to an end. I would like to say that it is not all gloom and doom. There is a lot that we can do at individual level to ensure that we are contributing to reversing these losses. And one of the actions is awareness creation. And this talk show, I must commend you for bringing me here to let the public know that there is a threat, but also there is something we can do about it. There have been a lot of awareness around schools, a lot of programs to educate young people and to train children up at a young age to know the importance of the environment, but also looking at our individual patterns of production and consumption. Do we need all the food that we buy? And once we buy it, how do we manage the waste that is generated from this food? Are we able to recycle? Are we able to reuse? Are we able to avoid? For instance, plastics is a huge menace. Are we able to avoid using plastic that is a menace to our water systems? Are we able to limit our consumption to the extent to which we only consume what we need rather than just a wasteful consumption? Yeah.
It seems to me that even as you speak of these things, that there has to be the effort needs to be concerted.
Yes.
Because these things that you talk about, advocacy for these things, have to take on the nature of a campaign. Yes. And they have to be continuous in nature. You cannot start talking about loss, biodiversity loss and its impact on the nation and the environment and stop at some point. It has to be continuous flows of information. It has to be from the very youngest to the very oldest. There are people who live on the edge of dump sites. There are people who then continue adding waste to that dump site, not for anything, but for want of a proper place to dispose of their garbage. So are these messages running through and through, from the highest echelons of those who can do something about it to the user at the very bottom of the totem pole? So here are we talking about cleaning our rivers. Here we're talking about planting trees, 10 of you to plant trees. And is there then a split mind here when it comes to looking for what you will eat on a daily basis or conserving the environment? And that's why I think that unfortunately there's a competition for attention in terms of priorities. That how will you be able to convince that woman or that man who is looking for food that, you know what, where you live and where you're dumping your garbage is not really helping us right now, and this woman is not listening to you because they're thinking, okay, that's great, but you know what, I have to eat today. And so I think that's what puts us in a precarious situation, because too much in terms of percentage of our population is grappling with survival at the very basic level and is not able to offer any more in terms of their mind towards some of the things we're talking about. I think that is where a challenge is. And then the question is, how do we deal with that challenge?
Yeah, you've rightly stated that there are a lot of competing needs, but unfortunately this is one issue that we cannot delegate. As I've mentioned earlier, this biodiversity loss threatens our very existence. So instead of looking at it as a problem to solve after I have met my basic needs, we need to think of it as a problem that I need to solve as I meet my basic needs. Because with that, as we continue to ignore it, we are continuing to threaten our children and our children's existence. So my take on this is that let us have every hands on deck. I mean, Kenya is one of the countries that is always ahead in terms of taking action on these kinds of threats. Let us have our leaders talking to their constituents. Let us have influencers out there talking about climate change, talking about biodiversity loss and what needs to be done. Let us have social media buzzes going on and on about what needs to be done, because this is one issue that every hand has to be on deck for us to come up with lasting solutions. Yeah.
You know, for what you're saying to make sense, one has to large picture perspective, looking into the future. Everything we're talking about needs to be inculcated in young school-going children. If children learn this from a very early age, they'll grow up understanding it.
Definitely.
These jaded adults who have other interests and whose focus is completely different. Because you look at a tree, you're seeing charcoal. Yes, you look at a tree, you're thinking
timber.
Building. Yes, exactly. Okay. You need, in the absence of a focused and deliberate attention on ensuring that school-going children from the earliest age are taught this process and the importance of it, then we've lost that battle.
That is very true. I think young people hold the biggest hope for me. We have seen a number of innovations in different sectors that have been driven by young people. We have seen campaigns like Fridays for Future is one of the campaigns that I really follow closely, where young people are standing up and saying, even school is not important if we do not address climate change. We have seen a lot of renewed energy from young people calling out leaders during international and global meetings and saying, enough talk, let us move to the action. So I think our education system needs to be alive to these threats and to these biodiversity threats that we are talking about. And our education system needs to take into consideration that we need to educate and equip our young people to address threats that we may not even understand the extent of it. I mean, today we are talking about the lion population in Kenya being at 2,500. Can you imagine? We have come to a level where our lion population is at 2,500 in Kenya. So if we continue with this kind of trajectory, it means that in the next 2 or 3 generations, there may not be lions to see. We might only see them in museums or in photos. So young people are the most at risk in terms of the threats, but they also offer the biggest hope for addressing biodiversity threats.
Let's take a break on that note. At 9:32, 28 minutes to 10 o'clock, having a biodiversity conversation, and we're saying that the loss of biodiversity in our environment today actually could have a greater impact than if we didn't pay any attention to it at all. Olivia Adhiambo is here with us, and we'll continue that conversation when we come back from this break. An opportunity to remind you that Centum Properties is saying head on over to Two Rivers and have a look at what they're offering in terms of prime real estate. A 1-2 bedroom where you're paying rent today could actually become yours. Take that same amount that you pay in rent and start the journey towards home ownership. Walk into any bank, your bank today, ask them, the Kenya Mortgage Refinancing Company, who are they? They will tell you. Then you'll say, I want that. And then you will say, okay, how do I get a mortgage? And they'll say, you can talk to them and they will be able to offer you a mortgage where you pay 8 to 9%. And this rent that you pay could actually begin to be your mortgage payment, and your journey towards home ownership would then begin. Want to know more about those properties? Text 2 Rivers to 22365.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Revenge is for children. It's for kids. When you grow up, you realize the best revenge you can take on somebody is to ignore them.
I'm just new in politics. It is not everybody's cup of tea. That's why some people come in one term and that's it for them.
Political parties in this country do not have ideologies, whether luring or otherwise.
And that is the effect of corruption.
Any time an offense occurs anywhere in the country, it is the job of the Inspector General to look into it. Whether it's corruption, whether it's murder, whether it's betting, that is his job.
If we have chosen to be a corrupt nation, then we produce corrupt leaders. Everything then becomes chaotic that you cannot be able to change a nation.
The Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation.
Close your eyes. Imagine your unsecured personal loan application has been approved. Imagine all the things you can do and buy. Imagine all the life goals you can achieve. Now, stop imagining. Talk to your employer to switch to I&M at Work and get access to Kenya's largest unsecured personal loan of up to 10 million shillings. Call 0719 088 000 today. I&M. Tunakujali.
Aki, I feel like... Yum!
Have exactly what you're craving when you crave it at Shell Select. Crave it. Have it.
This year's Kuza Awards are here, and we are banking on you to vote for us. All you have to do is SMS Kuza for free to 15601 and vote for.
Okay, coming out of traffic hour, shouldn't be too crazy from now here on out. Looks much better as you're going into different parts of the city. You should be all right coming off a thicker superhighway now. That shouldn't give you any issues as you're then heading into the city. All right, what else are we looking at? A little bit of traffic that's left coming off of James Gishuru, just a little bit of that. Into the CBDs where most of the action is happening. Limu Road still has a little bit here and there, but you should be fine. Mombasa Road didn't offer up any drama today. Just as you get past the Nyeri Stadium roundabout, however, you'll contend with a little bit of it going towards Haile Selassie at the junction. Apart from that, I think we're all hunky-dory. Let's have a look through the morning, see what traffic looks like, but you should be fine. Speak to us on Spice FM, KE on Twitter.
Spice up your life. Business news with Spice FM.
I'm Dennis Aseto. A civil society organization comprising 25 players has faulted the proposed housing fund that will see employed Kenyans taxed at 3%. Instead, the group wants the state to control expenditures. It adds that the tax hike is punitive, coming at a time when the country's economy is slowly recovering from the effects of COVID-19 pandemic. Low-cost airline Jambojet will be participating in this year's SkyTeam Sustainable Flight. The Sustainable Flight Challenge will involve a short-haul return flight between Nairobi and Mombasa on May 26, 2023. TSFC aims to help global airlines accelerate their sustainability journey. Mobility company Bolt has opened a driver management center in Nairobi that will address motorist concerns. The facility will be accessed on an appointment basis to ensure seamless and effective management of driver issues. It will offer driver support, effective communication channels, training opportunities, community building, issue resolution, driver appreciation, and positive branding. Nigeria commissioned Dangote refinery amid hopes of transforming the country into a net exporter of petroleum products, but analysts say securing crude supplies could affect it achieving full production this year. The government of outgoing President Muhammadu Buhari sees the refinery as the answer to Nigeria's repeated
mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice.
All right, coming back in at 21 minutes to 10 o'clock. We're having a biodiversity loss conversation this morning with Olivia Aviambo, and certain questions being asked. I know Sisi wanted to come in on one point, but here we are saying that if certain things are not done, this is what will happen. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times, sometimes we need to hear that this is what will happen in order to kickstart or at least continue with some kind of action. You'll find that some people went to the doctor and the doctor said, well, you only have so long before these negative things start to happen, and then you find people kicking, getting better in health, etc. So sometimes if we hear that what will happen again and again, it then now pushes folks to do something about the situation.
Yes, indeed. I think what the scenario that we are looking at, if we continue with inaction, number one is we are losing species. I've talked about the population of lions in Kenya standing at about 2,500. Who would want their grandchildren to ask them what it felt like to have lions, and not being able to your great-grandchildren not being able to see those lions for themselves? I've talked about bees being very key in our food systems. Bees are under threat because of the chemicals we use in our farms. So if we continue with business as usual, we won't have the pollination function taking place, which means that our food chain will continue to decrease, or the food that you're able to access will continue to decrease. Biodiversity provides other services that we enjoy, such as water. As we continue to diminish our water towers, because our water towers form part of the biodiversity, it means the water available for our use will continue to diminish, and this will lead to other threats such as human and wildlife conflict. Kenya has just come from a very severe drought, and we know that with severe drought, it means that there's limited pasture, there's limited water that is available for both human and wildlife, and this is where human-wildlife conflict starts to manifest, because wildlife starts to move into human spaces to be able to access food, to be able to access water, and the conflict emerges from there. So with a business as usual approach or mentality, it means that we will lose species whose value we probably do not fully know right now, because a lot of the species we are losing, we fully have not done the extensive research to know what other values they have, and they also have an existential value. We'll continue to see a change in our surroundings in terms of the aesthetic nature, aesthetic value of our surrounding. The food and water provisioning services will continue to diminish, leading to conflict. So we do not want to go down that road. I think this is a point of wake up and a point of clarity for all of us, so that we are able to take action before we get to that scenario. Yeah.
Whenever one talks about the environment, now you introduce a term like biodiversity.
Yes.
So you're now talking about how all living creatures interact.
Yes.
Because it's not just plant or trees, it's the animals who share this space with us, ourselves.
Exactly.
These microorganisms, insects, all these things. Now, yes, there's always the threat, but the biggest threat is argued to be the human being. Yes. However, in a country like ours, a country that claims it has wonderful laws, a beautiful constitution that's supposed to take care of all these things, and yet it doesn't take place. So the biggest threat to biodiversity therefore becomes the government, because there's even a ministry that is supposed to be in charge of things like environment and aspects of the environment. So everything that works around and is part of the environment, there is a structure that is supposed to look after it. See, when people talk about drought and people talk about an absence of water, and then we know there exists huge reservoirs of aquifers in the country, and you are told that the problem maybe it's too much salinity, and yet we also know that modern technology has brought to our attention and knowledge desalination plants that use solar. And in some of the areas that we have these problems, there's more solar than you know what to do with. And yet you don't hear a conversation about how it is that what is available, this resource can be tapped so that it actually serves the purpose for which it was intended. So when I say it is government, it is not that I'm attempting to be facetious. I'm pointing to where the problem is, because when you talk about a situation where the fundamental interest, and you touched on it, is how to survive the day. Who can change that perspective? Because the individual is doing what they can within their means and is keeping alive and staying alive. But to go beyond that, essentially we're saying it is beyond the individual. So how then do we make this conversation something that stops being a conversation and becomes part of our reality? Because this conversation we had about trees, it's good because trees are things we live with and we understand. If you do the maths of the 50 billion trees and you look at the landmass of this country, if they're all planted, it means it would occupy 85%, bless you, of our landmass. But what it also means is that we need to be planting 2 million trees every day. Now you tell me, good conversation, 50 billion, 2 million trees every day, tell me.
Let me take you back to your initial statement about humans being the biggest threat. Yes. Let me start from there. Yes. And yes, indeed, as humans, our activities or our actions is what is really accelerating biodiversity loss. And I think I've alluded to some of the actions. We have converted natural habitats for settlement and for agriculture and infrastructure. We are polluting the environment without any sort of care or alarm. We are overexploiting natural resources, unsustainably overexploiting natural resources. We might continue pointing the finger in different directions, whether we want to blame it on the government, whether we want to develop to blame it on developed countries. But I think we also have to look at what individual actions are we taking. The government will not come to your house to tell you to disaggregate your waste and remove the plastics for recycling and use the organic waste to make manure. I think that there are some actions that boil down to individual responsibility, individual awareness, and I am hoping that this is one of the avenues that the public can know that we cannot continue to shift this blame to the government or to other entities, but it's time that we take individual responsibility. The ambition of the 15 billion trees, yes, it is ambitious, but I believe that if we aim for the stars, we will land in the moon. If we continue to make ambitious commitments, then this ambition will rub onto everyone, and everyone will have the individual responsibility to take up this ambition. I, for instance, am very much committed to planting trees around where I live, around my surrounding, just to ensure that I am meeting that commitment. And I hope everyone listening to this show will be committed to plant at least a tree, 2 trees, 5 trees, 10 trees, just to ensure that your surrounding is close to nature as possible. But it's not just about tree planting, it's about also natural regeneration. I know it sounds like a really big word, and I'll try to break it down.
What's that?
But there are spaces that spaces that do not necessarily need trees, but need to be left alone to regenerate. For the indigenous plants that existed to grow on their own. So it's this biodiversity, reversing biodiversity loss. I want to emphasize it's not just tree planting. We also have to talk about regeneration, particularly in grasslands. We have to leave them to just grow naturally back to the grasslands or whatever vegetation that existed, to regenerate and to grow on its own. It's about planning. I've talked about land use plans, the national land use plan that is in place, but within the land that you have bought, how effectively are you planning to ensure that there is space for nature? If you have an acre, if you have 5 acres somewhere, how are you ensuring that a percentage of this land that I have is actually left for nature to coexist with whatever other activities I am doing? So yes, my rallying call today is not just to point the fingers, but also to look at individual responsibility. Absolutely. And not to look at biodiversity as a faraway need, but to look at it as a need that, if not met, will lead to our own detriment
and destruction. What role do governments play? If we look at so many things happening here, the climate action conversation, climate change conversation, we have now there's a summit that will actually be hosted in Nairobi in the coming months, weeks, right? Yeah. Governments are represented through organizations, are pulled into this conversation. Hopefully that they are leading the pack when it comes to these conversations and what should happen. Apart from having meetings in swanky hotels and resorts, what role do governments play in making sure that the loss of biodiversity is reduced, that climate action is actually an action, and that activities are taking place? Because for me, I look at it as an all-encompassing thing. That means that your ministries of education, environment, all of these are working in tandem to reach this goal. But what would you see as goals or activities that governments then must be involved in if this thing is going to be actually taken seriously?
Yeah, I mean, the first and the biggest role of the government is to play a facilitative role, and facilitative in different aspects, to facilitate, first of all, the creation of the knowledge, so equipping our scientists to be able to do the research and to produce the findings, to facilitate our education systems to integrate this knowledge into our schools, into our universities, into our colleges. To facilitate our agriculture systems to be able to take into account what actions that need to be taken. Right now, there are conversations around climate smart agriculture, and the government's role is to facilitate and ensure that the environment for climate smart agriculture is conducive. People are aware on what they need to do to implement climate smart agriculture. So for me, I would largely say it's a facilitative role to put in place the policies, to put in place the institutions that actually drive this process, and also to inspire the public, such as with the 15 billion tree campaign, to inspire the public to take action in what it needs to be done. Yeah.
Do you think there's enough of an understanding across board about this? I mean, we could have technocrats in certain parts who have it's understood this is what needs to be done. Yeah. But is there an understanding and accommodation across board, again, like these, the departments, the ministries, organizations, individuals? Is there enough of an understanding across board as per, number one, what the problem is, what the action ought to be, and what the future holds depending on what decision you take?
I think no. I think biodiversity has been communicated very scientifically, and so it has always been looked at as a scientific problem, and so it has scientific solutions. If you ask me what biodiversity is in my local language, I would really struggle. And I think we need to get to a point where we talk about it in our vernacular language, in Swahili, in Luo, in Kikuyu, in Kisi, so that my grandmother back in the village can actually relate to what I'm saying, so that every individual, educated or uneducated, can actually have a point of relation and contact, because it has trickled down to that level. So I think we need to unpack it from that scientific level that it is currently, to take it down to the ground. And also to look at what local knowledge has to offer. And I think the solutions don't lie in the science only. I think the role of indigenous knowledge has has been downplayed in the solutions, but our grandmothers had the solutions on so many of the issues we are grappling with right now. So I think we need to take the conversation to the village level, to the local level, so that the interaction and the solutions can be very organic.
Sure.
Yeah.
Even as looking at where let's take Kenya as an example. Do you think it is possible, with the right conversations being had at the different levels at which they ought to be had, with the inclusion and activity of governments, with the understanding at an individual and community level, do you think Kenya can actually claw back on the losses that have been made and get to a place where biodiversity thriving, climate thriving, and as a result of that, communities and societies are thriving? Yes,
indeed. I mean, Kenya has been an early adapter in many innovations globally, and I don't think this challenge will be any different. I think what needs to be done is just to ramp up the energy and the call for action for people to begin to take up the challenge. I think we are at a point where we are seeing the effects. We are seeing the effects of climate change. We are seeing drought, and we're even seeing it from our neighbors. I mean, tropical cyclone Freddy that hit Malawi is a wake-up call for Kenya that, just because you're in an African country, you can't be hit by a tropical cyclone. So I think the message is already out there that we need to do something. And I think I have a lot of optimism that Kenya will be an early adapter in terms of reversing the losses of biodiversity. Yeah.
And how will this all play out, Marion, finally? How will this all play out still, again, in the race towards industrialization, in the race towards manufacturing, in the race towards these things that will then be the marks of a developed nation?
I think we have a lot of lessons to learn from developed nations that degraded their biodiversity. So if we are able to learn from the mistakes that were done by developed countries, we can make it right. And to some extent, we are learning in the energy sector. We are learning quite a lot, because Kenya depends on renewable sources of energy. And if continue in that direction, then we'll be able to some extent have jumped one hurdle of relying on coal and fossil fuels to power our industries. There's a lot of innovations that have come up over the years that prove that development and biodiversity can coexist. We have seen in countries such as Singapore, where superhighways are completely green. We have seen green buildings coming up, where the 90% of the energy that is powering a building comes from solar and wind energy. So we are at a really unique point where innovation can support us to develop, and not at the expense of biodiversity.
Okay. Well, I mean, the thing is that this, like we said, is the conversation that cannot stop, because it's a continuous place where, if we don't keep the conversation alive, we run the risk of forgetting what ought to be done at any one level at any one time, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Loss of biodiversity is a conversation that we have been having this morning. It is clear that there's so much that needs to happen when it comes to conversations just around our environment and what is important for us to survive. Our guest hour has been Olivia Adhiambo, who is the Project Officer, Civil Society, Partnerships and Policy, WWF Kenya. It's been great having the conversation with you today. And I think it's also important that we're still having experts younger in age who are having these conversations, with us today. So it's not just for people who've, been around the block.
Yeah, and isn't that inspiring to see young people coming up and standing up and say, I want to be counted in the discussion, in the solutions, in the rooms where solutions are generated.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being here this morning. Kenya's biggest conversation comes back to you tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Enjoy Sugar and Spice and everything nice after here. And then Yolanda and DJ Absolute come in for Sugar and Spice from 11 o'clock until 2. Remember that Edward will take you home on the Spice Drive from 3 p.m. today. Kenya's biggest conversation comes back tomorrow morning. It's been brought to you by Assis Tea, enjoying tea manufactured here for the global market that you can enjoy in different variants of lemon, masala, purple, green, all across board. Thanks for keeping it here. It's 10 a.m.
Spice up your life